Luke sat in his marginal history class, absently staring at the chalkboard while the professor droned on. It had been several days since Sabrina had helped him with his training. Strangely, she hadn't asked him for anything in return, yet. Luke didn't like owing people favors. His training in immobilization spells had come to a halt. Without a partner to practice on, he was stuck. He had thought about asking Enid, but she hadn't spoken to him lately. That in itself was odd. She used to chat with him during classes, in the halls, even in the cafeteria. Now, all he got were lingering glances and distant silence. That's all for today. Read Chapter 9 for the next class, the professor said, snapping his book shut. Chairs scraped back as students gathered their belongings. Luke packed up slowly. Asked her already. You're wasting time. Edgar's voice echoed in his mind. Unlike before, Edgar wasn't speaking out loud. Luke had finally managed to form a mental link with his ghostly ancestor. A tedious process, but effective. Now, they could communicate telepathically, which at least spared Luke from looking like a lunatic. Later, Luke replied silently, watching Enid leave the classroom with her friends. You're not asking her because of your pride, aren't you? She hasn't talked to you, so you're playing the same game. You Poe men are impossible. It's not that, Luke grumbled mentally. Oh no, the great Luke Poe, famed prodigy and socially inept shut-in, is scared of being rejected. How romantic. Edgar's voice oozed sarcasm. Luke rolled his eyes and left the classroom, intending to ignore Edgar until he reached his dorm. But just outside the building, he froze. Enid was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd. Waiting. Luke, she called softly, stepping toward him. Luke blinked. He hadn't expected her to initiate anything. Part of him had already assumed she'd written him off, like most people eventually did. What's up? He asked cautiously. I saw you the other day in the quad, she said, fidgeting with her fingers. You're never out on weekends. What are you doing? Nothing. Luke answered too quickly. Just getting some air. The moment he said it, he regretted it. That had been his chance to ask for help. Alone. Oh, I thought. Enid looked down, the spark in her voice dimming. She turned to leave. I have to go. See you. Wait. Luke stepped forward, catching her hand. Enid turned back, surprised, cheeks tinged with pink. What is it? She asked, glancing at their joined hands. I was looking for you, Luke said, his voice lower, more serious. Enid's heart skipped. His face was closer than usual. She could feel her pulse in her ears. Why? She asked softly. For training, Luke replied bluntly. Silence. That's it? Just for training? Enid asked, her brows knitting together. Yes. Why else? Luke tilted his head, confused. This boy, Enid's eye twitched. Her grip on his hand tightened. Ow, ow, Enid, your grip. Luke winced. She quickly eased up, but didn't let go. We can let go of each other's hands now, Luke muttered. Enid narrowed her eyes again, but released him anyway. Why didn't you just say something that day? She asked. You were with your friends. Laughing, having fun. I didn't want to ruin that with training talk, Luke admitted. Didn't seem right. It wouldn't have been boring if it was with you, Enid said, chin raised, tone firm. Luke's cheeks warmed. He coughed and quickly looked away. Oh, let's go to the gym. Ah, yes. Edgar mused in Luke's head, amused. Succumb to the chaos of adolescent love, boy. At the gym, Luke explained the immobilization technique. Enid didn't complain about being the target dummy. During breaks, she chatted easily, and for once, Luke wasn't so guarded. He found himself actually enjoying the conversation. When Enid didn't resist, Luke could hold her with the spell as long as he had with Sabrina. But when she pushed back, her raw strength let her break free within seconds. Still, it was solid practice. Days turned to weeks. Luke's technique improved. Now, even when Enid resisted with her full strength, he could hold her for over 3 minutes. Phew! 3 minutes and 22 seconds, Luke said, watching her wriggle free. He jotted the time in a notebook on the floor. That's almost as long as your first session with Sabrina, Enid teased, stretching her arms. Luke winced. Sorry. I know it's not exactly comfortable being locked in place like that. It's fine, Enid said, sitting down beside him. Their shoulders touched, and she didn't move away. It was hard to believe how much things had changed. A month ago, Luke couldn't imagine saying sorry to anyone, especially her. Improved again? Enid asked, nodding toward his notes. Yeah, 10 more seconds. Enid grinned. By the way, how much do you think I weigh? You going to tell me? Nope, she said, finger raised like a scolding teacher. A gentleman never asks a lady her weight. Luke pouted. Sabrina told me. Enid's smile vanished. Oh, Sabrina did, huh? Luke blinked. Did I say something wrong? Sabrina? Enid asked, her voice dipping into a tone that was nothing like her usual cheerful self. I didn't say anything, Luke replied quickly, snapping his notebook shut. He started to rise, but Enid's hands clamped down on his shoulders, firm and unyielding. Despite her delicate appearance, her strength was monstrous, and Luke wasn't getting up without her say-so. Did Sabrina Jones tell you how much she weighs? Do you ask every girl that? She asked with a tight, eerie smile that didn't reach her eyes. Listen to me, Enid. It's not what you think, Luke began, realizing with a chill that her nails were long enough to become claws if she lost her temper. He launched into an awkward explanation of how Sabrina had volunteered the information during training, completely unsolicited. As he spoke, Enid's grip gradually softened. Her expression shifted from icy to apologetic. I get it now. She suggested you two train together. I'm sorry, she said, her voice returning to its usual warmth. It's okay, Luke replied, rubbing his shoulders. His eyes lingered on her, curious and cautious. There was something wild about Enid, an edge that surfaced when her emotions ran high. Luke had seen flashes of it in the show, in the way her brothers behaved, leaping around and howling with raw energy. Maybe it was just a werewolf thing. Territorial, maybe? Especially with someone they liked? Luke frowned. That thought had crossed his mind more than once. He wasn't blind to Enid's interest in him. As for his own feelings, it would be a lie to say he felt nothing. He did care. He just didn't know how to care, not properly. Trust didn't come easy to him. Did I hurt you? Enid asked softly, noticing him still rubbing his shoulders. No, just a bit stiff. You've got great control, he said, offering a rare, genuine smile. Enid blinked in surprise. It was the first time she'd seen him smile like that. Not sarcastic, not cold. Real. So cute, she thought, blushing as her heart fluttered. Luke, meanwhile, seemed to realize what he'd done and immediately stood up, flustered. I just smiled, Luke thought, mildly alarmed. Hey, wait for me, Enid called, springing to her feet and chasing after him. She had been this close to giving him her first kiss. If only the stubborn boy hadn't bolted like a scared cat. His defenses are crumbling. Youthful romance strikes again, Edgar mused with a ghostly grin. Over a month alone with a pretty girl, and Luke had made no move. His great-great-grandson was either intensely disciplined or incredibly dense. Later that afternoon, in a few days, it's Halloween, Enid said, catching up to Luke as they walked back to the dorms. Yeah? So? Luke asked without looking at her. There's a party, remember? Enid said, nudging his arm. Right? She had been talking about it for days now. A costume party on the 31st. Luke didn't care much for parties, let alone costume ones. But he remembered her excitement, and he understood what she wasn't saying out loud. After several steps of silence, Luke glanced at her and muttered, Do you want to go together? Enid beamed, her entire face lighting up. Yes, I'd love to. She launched into a flurry of plans. I've already picked a few costumes. I'll text you the best ones. You just pick your favorite. We'll look amazing. I mean, scary. Super scary. Before Luke could reply, she'd vanished in a blur, off to her room to finalize everything. Luke stared after her. October 31st, Halloween night. The party was set to begin at 8 in the Raven Dance Hall, the same one from the Wednesday series. Stop staring at the damn clothes and get dressed. We're already late. Xavier grumbled from across the room. Luke sat in front of his bed, staring at the costume and accessories piled neatly on the sheets. Enid had delivered everything. Clothes, makeup, even instructions. Xavier was already dressed as Frankenstein. Stitches, greenish skin, ragged clothes. Surprisingly detailed. Somehow, Luke had agreed to go with Xavier to pick up the girls, Enid and Bianca, and head to the party together. Fine, Luke muttered, grabbing the outfit and disappearing into the bathroom. 20 minutes later, he emerged transformed. A tailored black Victorian suit hugged his frame, a long cloak trailing behind him, red on the inside. His face was paler than normal, dark shadows around his eyes. The fangs, realistic, slightly blood-stained, finished the look. Dracula. Damn, it suits him, thought Xavier, impressed despite himself. Luke's sharp features and naturally intense stare made him a perfect vampire. Xavier still didn't know how Enid had convinced him to go, let alone dress up. The boy was antisocial to the extreme. If word got out that Luke Poe was attending a school dance, dressed as Dracula, no less, Nevermore would lose its mind. Let's go. You took long enough, Xavier said, heading to the door. Makeup's not easy, Luke grumbled, following. As they made their way toward Ophelia Hall, Xavier shot a sideways glance at Luke. So, do you like Enid? Luke let out a grunt. I'm just asking. You're total opposites. She's all sunshine and sparkles. You're more haunted library energy. Luke raised an eyebrow. You and Bianca aren't exactly the same either. Fair, Xavier shrugged. Opposites attract, right? Luke didn't reply, but he didn't disagree either. Truth be told, he had let Enid in more than anyone else. There was something about her. It felt genuine, real, and that mattered to him. When they arrived at the common room of Ophelia Hall, only two girls remained, Bianca and Enid. The rest had already left with their friends or dates. Enid looked up the moment Luke stepped in, and her smile bloomed like sunlight through storm clouds. Luke was still unsure how tonight would unfold, but somewhere beneath the costume, beyond the fangs and the shadows, he wasn't dreading it. Not entirely.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Finally, they're here. What took you so long? Asked Bianca with an irritated expression, looking at Xavier. I'm sorry. We take a long time to put on makeup. We are not used to it, Xavier said, trying to calm Bianca down. Luke was surprised that Xavier didn't blame him, since it was his fault they were late, even though it was only 15 minutes. Bianca was wearing a skeleton costume. Her face had makeup simulating a skull. It looked great on her thanks to her bald hairstyle. Luke couldn't believe that a girl would shave her head as a hairstyle. Come on, I don't want to be late, Bianca said, taking Xavier by the hand and hurrying to the dance. She didn't want to lose her presence. Luke, you look great. The real Count Dracula, but more handsome, said Enid with a big smile and shyness at the last part. Thanks, said Luke, scratching his cheek. The costume is thanks to you. It's very well done, he added, and Enid smiled. Luke looked at Enid. The girl was wearing a worn white Victorian dress with some torn parts that gave her a more sinister appearance. She was wearing a white cloak with some holes in it. Makeup that made her paler than normal, as well as Luke. Dark shadows around her eyes and neat vampire fangs. Her lips were painted a very striking blood red with her pale skin. Enid was disguised as Lucy Westenra, a young girl who becomes a vampire because of Dracula and is under his influence. Unlike Xavier and Bianca, they both dressed up in the same theme. You look great too, Luke added. Thanks. Look, this is where you bit me, said Enid, stretching her neck. Luke saw 2 bite marks on her neck. Oh, it's very well done, said Luke, walking up to Enid's neck and looking at it closely. Enid felt Luke's breathing close to her and began to feel nervous. Let's go. We don't want to be any later, she said as she started walking, and Luke followed her. Why was Bianca in your dorm? Asked Luke as he walked next to Enid. According to what Xavier told him, they would split up, but before they left, Bianca texted him telling him she was in Enid's dorm, so they went together. She said it was to meet a friend, but I know that's an excuse. There are 2 reasons why she came to my dorm, said Enid as her spark of gossip and school drama ignited. What reasons? Asked Luke, though he knew Enid would tell him since once she starts talking, she doesn't stop. The first one is you, said Enid, pointing her finger at Luke. Her nails were painted black, a color she didn't really like, but she had to because of the costume she was wearing. Me? Asked Luke, confused. She didn't even say hello to me, he added. Bianca is very proud. She's like Nevermore royalty, but I'm sure like everyone else she's interested in Nevermore's most famous student, replied Enid. So much fame was Carey's fault. A book he plagiarized that made him have over 100,000 followers on every social media. Added to his famous last name among outcasts was too flashy, no matter how horrible he acts with everyone except Enid. Considering his fame on social media, and in general, he could be considered the most famous student at Nevermore. Enid felt pride for some reason in being the closest person to Luke. However, she didn't approach Luke because of his fame. She did it because she was attracted to his personality, which scared everyone else away. She created a personal blog and could have asked Luke to publicize it, but she never asked him to do so. With a simple mention of Luke on his social media, her blog would grow by leaps and bounds, but she decided to work and grow it on her own. The second one asked Luke. Sabrina Jones, Bianca's direct competition. There are sparks between them over who will be our year's Nevermore queen. They are the most popular students in our year, replied Enid enthusiastically. She was very fond of gossip. Is Sabrina in your dorm? Asked Luke, and Enid nodded. So far, Sabrina had never contacted him to ask for the favor he owed her. It was too scary to be alone with Bianca. Her queenly aura is suffocating, said Enid, shivering as she remembered the 15 minutes she had to spend with Bianca in silence. You make a better queen, said Luke. Me queen? No kidding, Enid said, waving her hand in denial. I'm not kidding. Your personality is much better than Bianca's. You treat everyone nicely, and most importantly, you're 100 times cuter than that bald skull, Luke said with difficulty. It was the first time he had ever said something so embarrassing. He had to add an insult to make it not so embarrassing. 100 times cuter? That's a lot, Enid thought, feeling her cheeks flush. Luckily, thanks to it being night, Luke didn't notice. Puff! Enid started to laugh at Luke's last sentence. What are you laughing at? I'm not kidding, Luke said. You're the only person who would dare call Bianca a bald skull. First of all, skulls don't have hair, said Enid and started laughing. Well, it's true. She must have picked that costume because she already saved herself a lot of work. She didn't have to buy a wig, Luke said with a slight smile, and Enid, who was controlling her laughter, started laughing again. Luke watched as Enid laughed. He didn't want her to stop. She looked cuter than usual. He had never felt anything like that. Between jokes and laughter, they reached the outside of the hall where the party was being held. The entrance to the hall had many decorations. Dim lights flashed intermittently, casting ghostly shadows that danced on the walls lined with fake cobwebs. Carved pumpkins, lit from within with flickering candles, led the way with their orange glow, revealing grotesque faces carved into their orange skins. An archway of twisted branches and dried leaves marked the entrance to the hall, guarded by sculptures of gruesome monsters. Creepy, Enid said fearfully, hugging Luke's arm. Dark curtains, decorated with bat and skull motifs, separated the main hallway from the parlor, momentarily concealing the party that awaited on the other side. They sure put some effort into the decorations. I thought you'd be braver, Lucy, Luke joked. Scary things aren't my thing. I prefer vivid colors and cheerful things, said Enid, who wouldn't leave Luke's side. What? How do you like it, Carrie? It's too gory, said Luke confused. Carrie is indeed gory, but it didn't scare me. She's like a psychic outcast who ends up meeting a tragic fate. The story captivated me. Same with the works of Dracula or Frankenstein, said Enid, trying to explain her point. I get it. You're scared of scarier monsters like the Faceless or the Hide, right? Said Luke, and Enid nodded several times. While Carrie, Dracula, or Frankenstein may be considered in the realm of horror, to Luke they didn't elicit a fear that kept him awake at night. That could be triggered by works like it, where Pennywise appears, a terrifying clown that tormented many people, or The Ring. There appears a girl with long, dark, and disheveled hair with pale and emaciated skin, dressed in a long, faded white dress. Just seeing their faces gives me the creeps, Enid whispered close to Luke's ear. She didn't want a faceless person to hear her and hurt their feelings. Yeah, you don't know if they're looking at you or talking, nodded Luke as he walked beside Enid towards the curtain. They passed through the dark curtains and saw the room where the party was being held. Dim lights, tinted in shades of orange, purple, and green, cast dancing shadows on the walls adorned with cobwebs and paper bats. In the dark corners, illuminated pumpkins glow with a ghostly glow, their crooked smiles lending a terrifying atmosphere. The ceiling is covered by a canopy of black, shimmering webs, dotted with stars and moons that glow in the dark. Mechanical spiders dangle from invisible threads, moving slowly as if on the lookout for their next prey. In the center of the hall was a large dance floor illuminated by twinkling lights, filled with nevermore students enjoying themselves. "How long did it take them to decorate this?" asked Luke, impressed by all the decorations that were so well done. "We set up all the decorations over a month ago. I helped. Everyone went all out for today," said Enid with a smile. "Oh, I see," said Luke without as much enthusiasm. He hadn't helped at all. He was too lazy and lonely to have lent a hand. "Let's go to one of the tables." "I helped make the candy too," said Enid, leading Luke to a table where two of her friends, Divina and Yoko, were sitting. The tables are adorned with themed centerpieces, including carved pumpkins, tinkling candles, and dark floral arrangements. "Enid, you're finally here," said Yoko, getting up and hugging Enid, who happily accepted. "Great costume," Enid praised Divina with a faint smile. "Thank you. Your costume is great too," said Enid with a smile and her usual cheerfulness. Luke looked at Yoko and Divina's costumes. They were both dressed as mummies, girls in couple costumes, thought Luke with a raised eyebrow. He knew that Yoko was Enid's roommate and close friend. As for Divina, she was from Bianca's dorm. She became friends with Enid through Yoko. "Whoa, you really came, Luke?" Yoko said, looking at Luke. She knew Enid was bonding with him, but she didn't think this stubborn, rude boy would come to a party. "Why so surprised?" asked Luke with a grimace. With other people, he still had little patience. They weren't Enid. "Hey, Yoko, I told you Luke was coming. Didn't you believe me?" asked Enid indignantly. "Yeah. Well, not really. Don't blame me." You could hardly see him coming out of his bedroom. "Who'd think he'd come to a party?" replied Yoko, being sincere. "Should I send her flying?" thought Luke, irritated by Yoko's comment. It wasn't nice to be called lonely in front of your face, although Yoko wasn't lying. "Look, everyone's surprised you came," said Divina. Luke and Enid looked around and noticed many discreet stares at them. "Make a wish. Maybe their wish for tonight will come true," Luke snorted, looking at Yoko and Divina with a slight smile. They both felt attraction for each other, but neither could bring themselves to take the next step. "Come on, Divina. There's Bianca and the others," Yoko said with a frown as she grabbed Divina's hand and walked away. "That was rude," said Enid, watching her friends walk away. "Her comment was rude too, and she didn't even believe you," said Luke, pouring himself a glass of blood punch. It wasn't real blood. It was red fruit juice and lemon-lime soda, garnished with pieces of fruit to simulate blood clots. "Well, it's true," said Enid, taking a cup for Luke to pour punch. "Look at jelly worms. I cooked several. Try them," said Enid, grabbing a handful of worms and popping them in Luke's mouth. "Delicious. Very different from how they look," said Luke, chewing on the worms. While they were preserving and tasting the creepy sweets, the party music changed. The students on the dance floor made a round, leaving two couples in the center. "Let's go see what's going on," said Enid, taking Luke's hand and heading to the dance floor. Thanks to Luke's presence, they made their way easily and didn't have to push through the crowd. They made it to the front row and saw the two couples. On one side were Bianca and Xavier. Across from them were Sabrina Jones and Ajax Petropoulos. Ajax is Sabrina's partner, thought Luke, a little surprised. Sabrina was disguised as a she-devil. She was dressed completely in fiery red. She had red horns on her forehead and a sort of devil's tail at her waist. Ajax had disguised himself as a zombie. His clothes were worn and torn. He had a lot of makeup to give him the look of a zombie, especially on his face, although it was strange that he had a cap, but he had no choice. The music was horror music combined with electronica to make it danceable. A dance competition began between the two couples. More than anything, it looked like a competition between Bianca and Sabrina. All the students started cheering and whistling. Luke looked to his left and right. Everyone seemed to be enjoying this dance competition, even Enid, who was clapping and watching the show with a smile. Everyone except him. He was bored. He didn't understand how so many people were entertained by dancing or watching people dance. He only came here because of Enid. Otherwise, he would rather stay in his room sleeping, reading something, or playing some video game. Why don't I like it? Luke thought, feeling out of place. He started to walk out of the room. He wanted to get some air. He walked out of the hall, and in one of the hallways, he sat on the floor looking up at the bright white moon. It was not a full moon night. It was only half visible. "Luke, why did you go out?" asked Enid, who had followed him. "I don't like parties," replied Luke without lying. "What? Then why did you agree to come?" asked Enid, sitting close to him and looking at him. "Because you invited me," replied Luke, and he could see Enid's cheeks blushing. With her pale makeup and the moonlight, it was easier to tell. "Sorry for bringing you to a place you don't like," Enid said sheepishly. "It's not your fault. I decided to come here. Besides, being with you is more fun," replied Luke, surprised at all the embarrassing things he said tonight. "Am I weird?" asked Luke. Even the outcasts seemed to like to party, just like the normies. He thought with the outcasts he would have more in common, but he didn't. "Well, you're weirder than the average outcast, but I don't see that as a bad thing. Your attitude is genuine, and that is what I like about you. Besides your face, Enid laughed and walked over to Luke. Was that an insinuation? Thought Luke, watching as Enid's face slowly moved closer to his own. His eyes watched Enid's lips, which were getting closer and closer to his own. He wasn't an idiot. He knew what he should do at this point. He brought his lips closer to hers until they both touched and kissed. They both closed their eyes as they concentrated on the kiss. After a few breathless seconds, Luke and Enid slowly pulled back and opened their eyes. They both looked at each other without saying a word. Luke didn't know what he should say after they had their first kiss. "Did I do it right?" asked Enid, breaking the silence. "I didn't do anything weird, right? It's my first kiss." Enid began to stammer nervously as she waited for Luke's acceptance. "Huh? If you kissed right?" "Well, I don't know. It was a first kiss too," replied Luke, scratching his cheek. "Was that your first kiss?" asked Enid, and a smile formed on her face. She'd had Luke's first kiss. That added to the value. Plus, it was also her first kiss. "What did you expect? I'm a loner," Luke said with a slight grimace. Although if he had wanted it, he would have gotten it before. Last year at the normie school party, a lot of girls asked him to the dance, but he turned them down. He had something more important to do. Fill the place with shit. The night is young. "Let's go have fun," said Enid, getting up with great enthusiasm. She felt a great energy inside her body. "Have fun?" asked Luke. Enid walked over to the wall where there were several sticks with paper bats that had gone wrong. She removed the bats and picked up 2 broomsticks. "Catch," said Enid, tossing a stick to Luke. "What do you want to do with this?" asked Luke, taking the stick. "Let's have a duel," said Enid with a smile, pointing the stick at Luke. "Oh, that sounds like fun," said Luke with a slight smile and standing up. Luke and Enid spent a long time simulating a fencing match with wooden sticks in the moonlight. They weren't fighting seriously. It was for fun. It was much more fun than dancing. Then they went back into the parlor to drink lots of punch and eat lots of candy while they talked. Halloween night was over. It was much more fruitful than Luke had first thought. Several days have passed since the Halloween party. The month of November began. The temperature had dropped, and the cold was starting to set in. His relationship with Enid had improved a lot since their first kiss. Enid now spent most of her time with Luke when they had classes or breakfast in the cafeteria. Luke didn't mind Enid's presence, although it was something new for him who had always been a loner. Enid was very talkative and enthusiastic, but Luke didn't mind and even liked having her presence by his side. He continued to keep up his psychic and physical training routine. Some of the psychic training he did with Enid's help, such as immobilization. They also trained physically in practice fights. Luke could not beat Enid no matter how much better his technique was. His physical strength, stamina, and reflexes were inferior to Enid's. Although if he used his current immobilization, he could easily win against her. "Make it official." "What?" asked Luke, looking up from his book and looking at Xavier sitting on the bed with his arms crossed looking at him. They were in his dorm room. Luke was copying back homework that luckily Enid lent him to copy. "Make it official," repeated Xavier with a serious look. Make what official? Asked Luke. Your relationship with Enid, replied Xavier. I don't know what you mean, said Luke, going back to copying the assignment. Oh, come on. Don't play dumb. Everyone noticed. You two are glued together all day, said Xavier with a slight smile. Just like any friend, Luke said. He didn't want people to be talking about his private life. Don't try to fool me. I know you two kissed, Xavier said, and Luke looked at him again this time with a frown on his face. Don't get mad, Xavier said quickly, holding up his hands. He didn't want to be attacked by Luke's telekinetic abilities, though he wouldn't get that far. Enid told Yoko about it. Yoko told Divina, and Divina told Bianca, who told me, he explained. Not that it was a secret either, Luke thought, shaking his head. It was normal for Enid to tell her close friend about the kiss. TSCH, first get a girlfriend before you talk to me about making my relationship official, Luke said disdainfully, clicking his tongue. Already have a girlfriend. You should be more aware of what's going on at school, said Xavier. Really? Asked Luke doubtfully. Yes. I kissed Bianca on Halloween night. That same day, I asked her to be my girlfriend, replied Xavier. Maybe Enid told me, but I didn't pay attention, thought Luke, looking at the floor. Since Enid was very talkative, there might be things he omits and doesn't hear. Anyway, listen to me. You have made your relationship with Enid official. A man-to-man advice, Xavier said again in a serious tone. Why is he so heavy-handed with making my relationship official, thought Luke, looking strangely at Xavier. Why, asked Luke. You make out with a girl and spend a lot of time with her, but you don't make your relationship with her official. That will only lead to trouble. The girl will most likely get mad. She'll think you don't love her, that you want to hide the relationship, or that you're a womanizer or something, explained Xavier. Should I believe this guy? Thought Luke doubtfully. This guy is right. Listen to him if you don't want to get in trouble with that blonde, said Edgar, floating close to Luke. Luke didn't know whether to take the advice. His relationship with Enid was going very well. It would be strange for her to get mad and bring up the subject of whether they were officially boyfriend and girlfriend or not. You're lucky Enid has patience. If I had taken that many days, Bianca would have started a big argument, Xavier said. Well, I'll think about it. Thanks, said Luke, nodding. He didn't want to hide his relationship with Enid. It would be bad if Enid thought that was the case. So he would have to talk to her about this issue. What's up? Asked Luke, looking at Xavier's dumbfounded face. I didn't know you could say thank you. Looks like you're not as horrible as you appear, said Xavier, impressed. This guy, thought Luke, regretting saying thank you. Luke decided to take Xavier's advice. When he was in the gym practicing with Enid, he talked to her about some way to make their relationship official. Enid happily agreed. Xavier was right. The girl was already worrying about this issue, and taking longer would not have been good. Luke never thought this moment would come. The day he gets a girlfriend. He always saw it as a long way off. Was he in love with Enid? He didn't know how to answer that question. From what he understood, if you were in love, you should want to be with that person all the time, feel butterflies in your stomach, and be on cloud nine. He didn't feel that way. That's not to say he doesn't care about Enid. He feels that she's the first person in this world that he can open up to, even a little bit. Also, he has fun being with her and finds her attractive. But not to the extreme of wanting to be 24/7 with her. That would be too exhausting. She's very enthusiastic and doesn't stop talking. There are even times when he stops listening to her and nods vaguely in response. Well, not all couples have to be in love, right? Thought Luke, who was walking alongside Enid holding hands down a deserted Nevermore hallway. Not being in love with Enid doesn't mean that Luke doesn't care about the girl and has no feelings for her. He cares about her far more than he cares about everyone he's ever met in this life. It's a sad thing to think since he's known her for a few months. The top people Luke cares about the most are as follows. 1. Enid. 2. Natasha. 3. Edgar. All people I've known for less than a year, thought Luke, feeling miserable in terms of social relationships. Edgar is in third place because he's a ghost, so he can't die. So his safety is something Luke doesn't care about. As for Natasha, he knows she took care of him, and he is very grateful for that. But he met her for a couple of months on vacation. To him, she was just the matron at his orphanage who never gave him preferential treatment during those years. So their relationship just started and it's not very deep. What are you thinking about? Asked Enid with her usual smile. On the training I haven't done yet today, Luke replied. Are you going to continue training? We just finished training at the gym. I thought we could do something more fun, Enid said with a pout. Luke had to admit that his girlfriend was very cute. He had a hard time telling her that since he is someone who shows little affection. Holding hands was a big step for such an emotionally distant person. Fun? What's on your mind? Asked Luke. Enid was the only person capable of getting him to skip part of his daily workout. Going to your room, Enid replied with a smile. Oh, my room. Well, let's go, replied Luke with a slight smile. Moments later in Luke's room, several shouts could be heard. Move faster, Luke, shouted Enid. I'm doing the best I can, replied Luke with sweat on his forehead. Put more heart into it. There's not much time left, said Enid in an anxious tone. Just in time, exclaimed Luke, sighing in relief. In front of him was a large screen displaying 4 shining stars and a score. We did it. 4 stars, said Enid in a happy tone as she let go of the controller and hugged Luke tightly. Luke would happily accept his girlfriend's hug, but he feels like his bones are being crushed. Yes. Now let me breathe, Luke said with difficulty patting Enid's shoulder, who quickly let go. Sorry, I got excited, apologized Enid, looking back at the screen. They were playing a console game. Since Luke had money to spare, he decided to buy a state-of-the-art console with several joysticks and a large TV. In Nevermore, it was not illegal to have these items of entertainment. It was similar to a MacBook or cell phone. Why are you two yelling so much? Asked Xavier, entering the room. We finally defeated the potato-eating demon, replied Enid, happily clenching her fist. What did you defeat it? I told you to wait for me, said Xavier with mixed surprise and indignation. You took too long. Was your makeout session with Bianca enjoyable? Asked Luke with a slight smirk. Shut up. Pass me a joystick, Xavier said without denying Luke's comment. Luke passed him a joystick, and the 3 of them began to play nonchalantly. It wasn't the first time he had played with Xavier. Just like him, he liked video games. Look at him having fun with his friend and his girlfriend, thought Edgar, wiping away an imaginary tear. It was like watching his son grow up, albeit a bit exaggerated. It's no good skipping training, though. Tonight, I'll make him train twice as hard, he thought with a faint macabre smile. Luke, this Saturday, you'll have another interview at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll pick you up a cab. Luke in his mind heard Natasha's voice. This was thanks to the telepathic link he shared with his housekeeper. Luke at this time already managed to reach the 15 kilometers distance and more, so could communicate with Natasha despite the distance. Not only that, the daily life of the link increased to over a month. Okay, do I already have the permission? Asked Luke without taking his attention off the game. Yes, the principal is already aware of it. Don't worry. So far, no sighting of the Spellman bastards, said Natasha. Maybe in my Nevermore days, they'll leave me alone. Like with my father, said Luke, not too alarmed by his archenemies. You must not be overconfident. Always keep your guard up. Once I finish the interview, you will return to Nevermore immediately, said Natasha in a serious manner. Yes, whatever you say, said Luke without giving it much importance. He didn't understand why Natasha was so paranoid. He'd done the occasional interview before, and nothing ever happened. Pass me the lettuce, Luke, said Xavier in a hurry. I'm coming, Luke said, ending his short conversation with Natasha. Luke was in his room lying down, playing with his cell phone. Next to him was Enid, who was sleeping soundly using his shoulder as a pillow. It was Friday. Classes were over. They played console games with Xavier for a while, then Xavier left, most likely to meet Bianca. So, they were left alone in the room. The day was cloudy and drizzling, which made them both very lazy, so they decided to go to bed. She seriously fell asleep, thought Luke, looking at Enid sleeping peacefully. Luke couldn't believe he had a cute girl sleeping on his shoulder. Since they made their relationship official, Enid was much more affectionate than before. Just then his cell phone rang. He got a message from an unknown number. He could recognize the person from the profile picture. It was Sabrina. Looks like it's time to repay my debt, Luke thought, opening the chat. Sabrina's request was something Luke had not expected, mostly because of its simplicity. The girl wanted Luke to accompany her to the Harvest Festival. The Harvest Festival is a place to have fun and have a good time with friends. There's a Ferris wheel, lots of food booths, games with prizes, etc. The first festival was held in 1948 and is a Jericho tradition. It is held on both Saturday and Sunday. Tomorrow is the first day. Most Nevermore students will attend, especially those with friends. Luke would not be attending, but since he started dating Enid, he has to fulfill his boyfriend responsibilities. So, they decided to have their first date at the festival. What now, thought Luke. If he said yes to Sabrina, his date with Enid would be ruined since they were planning to have the 2-day date. The logical thing to do was to tell her he couldn't, but Luke doesn't like to leave debts unpaid. Sabrina texted you? Luke was startled by the sudden question. He turned his head slightly and noticed that Enid's eyes were open and staring at the screen of his cell phone. At what point did she wake up? This is not good. Luke thought. Enid was a jealous person. Yeah, remember what I told you? I owe her a favor for helping me train. Luke replied quickly. I see, Enid said, focusing her eyes to read the message. Luke, realizing she wanted to read the message, wanted to take the cell phone out of her sight, but Enid, with superhuman reflexes, reached out her arm and took the cell phone from him. Since when is a favor a date? Asked Enid with a frown, reading the message. I don't know why she wants that, said Luke with a shrug. I'll figure it out, Enid said, beginning to write. Suddenly, she felt her whole body go rigid. She couldn't move. Luke took the cell phone out of her hands using the immobilization. Too late. She already answered her, thought Luke, sighing internally. The message sent by Enid pretending to be him was the following. Why? That favor sounds like a date. I have a girlfriend, and I'm loyal. I'm loyal, thought Luke. He would never write that. Hey, using immobilization is cheating, said Enid, whining and pouncing on Luke. Luke, who was half sitting up, was knocked down by Enid and fell against the mattress of his bed as Enid sat on top of him. Then you don't use your overhuman strength, said Luke, who started to feel nervous about having Enid on top of him. That's different, said Enid. Why? We're both using our powers, asked Luke, grabbing Enid by the waist. He pushed her down and changed positions. Now he was on top, and she was on the bottom. They both stared at each other and began to slowly bring their faces closer together. Just as their lips were about to meet, Luke's cell phone rang again. Luke picked up the cell phone that had been left open in Sabrina's chat room. She sent him a new message. See, look, she just wanted to use my telekinetic powers to win a prize in a game at the festival, Luke said, showing her the cell phone. Those are just excuses to hang out with you, said Enid, crossing her arms. Even though Luke is using her as a chair, she feels nothing. Her strength was way above average. She said, you're invited. You'll get a chance to interview Sabrina for your blog, Luke said, trying to convince Enid. He wanted to settle his debt as soon as possible, and more so if it was something as easy as winning a prize with his powers. It's true. Tell her we'll come, said Enid with a smile. She couldn't pass up the opportunity to interview one of Nevermore's most popular girls. It would be great news for her blog, and she'd be able to get a lot of information about Sabrina, especially if she has a boyfriend. There were rumors that she was dating Ajax, a Gorgon boy who chaperoned her at the dance. However, Sunday we will have our date. No third parties, Enid added in an irrefutable tone, and Luke nodded. Saturday and the day of the festival arrived. Luke, before going to the festival, had an interview at the Weather Vane, the most well-known coffee shop in Jericho. There was still no sign of Tyler, the Hyde, working here. The interview was about Carrie and his budding writing career. He'd had other interviews in the past, so he was already more used to it than the first time. Usually, the questions were always the same. What genres do you read? Why? Favorite book? How were you inspired to create Carrie? This time the interviewer asked him more personal questions. Do you have a girlfriend? Asked the bearded man who was writing everything down on his MacBook. I'd rather not answer that question, replied Luke in an irrefutable tone. If it were up to him, he wouldn't mind revealing that Enid is his girlfriend, but he has mortal enemies who want to assassinate him. So, he prefers to keep it private. However, it is information that can be discovered without much difficulty since everyone in Nevermore knows that they are dating. He prefers to be cautious and not to be showing it to everyone through social media. Enid, although she likes to take a lot of pictures in social media, was not upset that Luke did not want to make their relationship public to the hundreds of thousands of fans who followed him. This is because she doesn't want to show Luke as an interested girl. How do you spend your school life with so much fame all of a sudden? What was your school life like before you published Carrie? The man asked. Hearing the second question, Luke sketched a big smile internally. He had been waiting for such a question for a long time. School life at Nevermore is great. Despite the fame, everyone treats me like one of the guys. Which I appreciate, Luke said with a warm smile. It was all a lie. He didn't even have any friends. He miraculously got a girlfriend. Principal Larissa does a great job, added Luke, saying only good things about Nevermore. Larissa always wanted to give a good image, and since she helped him in many things, he didn't mind giving Nevermore good publicity, even though he's not the average student who enjoys his youth to the fullest. That's great. For a school that's in such a small town, the bearded man said with a smile. What was your school life like before Carrie? As far as I know, you lived in an orphanage in Boston, right? Asked the man. Yeah, I don't know if it will be a good idea what my school life was like before Carrie, said Luke with a sad expression. Why not? Don't hold back. Every story needs to come out, said the shoulder with more attention than before. He smelled a big scoop. If you insist, said Luke, taking a breath and starting to tell his past emotional, sad, overcoming, and many more exaggerated emotions. He told how he was bullied in previous schools because of his orphan status, making fun of his clothes, his lack of money, and not having parents. He was even beaten several times by bullies. This was not entirely true, as he always put up a fight. He did not let them hit him. He was careful in the dangerous streets of Boston. He did not need superpowers to defend himself from normal bullies who wanted to fight. He tried to seek help from teachers, but they turned a deaf ear to the bullying he suffered. Even though he got the best grades in the class, nobody helped him, and it was always hell to go to those schools. Without anyone giving him a hand, he decided to take revenge on his aggressors by playing harmless pranks, for which he ended up being expelled. On the other hand, his aggressors, despite all the evil they committed, were not punished because their parents had money and power. The interviewer could not believe this and felt great anger towards the schools, the bullies, and his parents. Unacceptable. Tell me the names of the schools. They cannot go unpunished. Bullying in 2020, the man said indignantly and clenched his fist. I don't know if it will be a good idea to do that, said Luke, acting hesitant. Don't be afraid. Their crimes will be exposed. They must pay, insisted the man. Well, since you insist, said Luke, hiding an evil grin. It was time to exact revenge on Brad, his family, and the school's staff, who did nothing. Luke gave him the specific names of the 3 schools. Not only that, he also told him the first and last names of Brad, his father, brother, etc. Also of the other kids who were bothering him. The names of the principal and vice principal of both schools. He tried not to forget anything. It was time for them to suffer for their actions. That's all there is to it. Take it easy, boy. Those people will suffer for their evil deeds, said the man, squeezing Luke's hand. He said goodbye, put his things away, and quickly left the place. He had big news to show the world. Your performance amazes me more every day, said Natasha, stirring her coffee cup. She raised Luke in an orphanage and knew that he always acted to turn things in his favor. It's a necessary means of justice, Luke said guilelessly. What he told the interviewer was not a lie. He just exaggerated the victim role a bit, since he didn't put his head down when he was bullied. Natasha paid for the coffee and walked out of the coffee shop with Luke. She hailed a cab and told the cab driver to take Luke to Nevermore. Remember, don't go to the festival. It's dangerous, Natasha warned, watching Luke from the sidewalk. On festival days, all Nevermore students had a free pass to go and have fun at the festival. So it was much easier to get out of school, and you didn't need to ask for special permission. Yeah, I know, Luke said without paying much attention. Don't try to go on a date with your little girlfriend, Natasha said. And this time, Luke looked at her in surprise. How did she know he had a girlfriend? Only the students at Nevermore knew, and Luke didn't upload anything to his social media. Natasha only visited Nevermore every few days to resume the telepathic link that had more shelf life every day. I remember great-great-grandfather saying, "She's an expert at gathering information." Luke thought, "I won't. You think because I have a girlfriend, I'm going to a stupid festival?" said Luke with a grimace of disgust. Natasha nodded. What Luke said made sense. She knew Luke was a loner and that he hated normal places like festivals. It would be strange for him to go and have fun there. Rather, Natasha couldn't imagine Luke having fun in that kind of place. "Shall we go?" asked the cab driver. "Yes," said Luke, and said goodbye to Natasha. The cab started up and drove further and further away from the redhead. "I'm rid of her now," thought Luke, sighing in relief. Now that he was not being followed by a paranoid person, he could join Enid and Sabrina to go to the festival. Before the cab driver took the road to Nevermore, Luke told him that there was a change of plans. The new destination was the festival. The cab driver didn't elaborate much on Luke's reason for changing his route. It was preferable for him since the festival was closer than Nevermore. He paid for the cab and got out. At the entrance to the festival, a large crowd could be seen from Jericho's point of view. Luke, as he approached, noticed two blonde girls standing at the entrance chatting happily. It was Enid and Sabrina. Enid noticed Luke. She raised her arm and waved it for Luke to see her, although he had already noticed her. Enid was wearing all pink clothes. She was wearing a wool pullover. On top of that, she had on a bright pink jacket. Her eyes had colored eyeliner that matched the outfit she was wearing. "Luke," said Enid, enthusiastically hugging him shamelessly. Luke was about to dodge the hug, but remembered that this was his girlfriend, so he accepted it. He still wasn't used to how affectionate Enid was, especially in public. "Hey, Enid, how are you?" said Luke, patting the girl's shoulder as he was hugged by her. She sure wore perfume, Luke thought, sniffing. A sweet fragrance was wafting from Enid's neck. "Good. I missed you," said Enid, looking at Luke closely. "Me too," said Luke, although internally he thought they had seen each other a few hours ago. So, the feeling of missing was distant. Without warning, Enid kissed him. Even though everyone knew about her relationship with Luke, she had to show Sabrina that he was hers and not available to any more girls. She thought the favor Sabrina asked of Luke was strange. The girl barely had a relationship with Luke. If she wanted to win a game with the help of a psychic, she could have asked someone else. Luke couldn't dodge the kiss. Their faces were too close. He would have dodged it because Sabrina is watching them, and he finds it awkward to show affection in front of someone he barely knows. "You two are very loving," Sabrina said, stepping closer and looking at the couple with a smile and narrowed eyes. Sabrina was wearing a leather jacket with black jeans. She looked like a typical bad girl from the movies. It looked good on her. A lot of guys passing by were gawking at her. As for Luke, he was wearing a black hoodie, black trousers, and black and white Nike sneakers. Very simple. "Really? We're always like this," Enid said, pulling her lips away from Luke's and looking at Sabrina with a smile. "Luke, come on. Let's win that prize," Luke said, taking Enid by the hand and starting to walk. Enid was surprised and blushing, as usually she is the one who takes the initiative to show affection like kisses, hugs, etc. "So fast? Let's go have some fun. The night is young," Sabrina said, walking beside Luke and Enid. "That's right. Let's get something to eat and play games. Lastly, we'll win the prize Sabrina wants," said Enid. She no longer cared if Sabrina was behind Luke or not. The two of them kissed, hugged, and held hands in front of her. She had already shown everything she needed to. "Well," said Luke, looking around at the large crowd walking through the festival booths. There were a lot of young people like them. Every corner of the festival was illuminated by a symphony of twinkling lights and vibrant colors. Garlands of lights twinkled in the air, enveloping every stall and attraction. At the heart of the festival rose majestically the Ferris wheel, its multicolored gondolas slowly ascending into the night sky. All along the streets, food stalls emitted mouth-watering, enticing aromas. The sweet aroma of freshly baked donuts, fluffy and colorful cotton candy, and sizzling caramel apples. It was all very pretty, except for the crowd. Luke put on his hoodie. He didn't want to be recognized. The signings he did at the literature had a lot of Jericho people asking for his autograph, so it was best to be cautious. Normies, Sabrina said with a frown as she walked carefully so as not to bump into people. Do you dislike them? Asked Luke. Yes, replied Sabrina without hesitation. Don't you? She added. Luke stood for a few seconds thinking. He usually disliked most people, whether they were normies or outcasts. I guess so, replied Luke. And you? Asked Sabrina, looking at Enid. I don't dislike them, but I don't trust them. The Jericho High always treated those of us from Nevermore horrible, replied Enid. Luke recalled some incidents that happened in the series. Most notably, 3 normie students who always pick on Nevermore students. Typical textbook bullies. As they chatted, they visited the food stalls that emitted enticing aromas. They ate freshly baked donuts, cotton candy, and caramel apples. Enid activated her gossip mode and started asking Sabrina a lot of questions, and she answered everything with a smile and without bothering to talk about her private life. Enid got some big news. Sabrina and Ajax started dating only 2 days ago and had kept his secret. Luke asked her why she asked him to accompany her to the festival when she got a boyfriend a day ago. She answered that Ajax caught a cold and was on bed rest, and her friends were bad at target games. The guy Enid liked on the show is Sabrina's boyfriend here, thought Luke with a strange look on his face. He hadn't gotten to the canon of a series yet, so Sabrina might end up with Ajax or something. As he thought this, Luke threw darts without hesitation toward some balloons. All 3 of his throws hit their targets. The stall attendant's face was one of disbelief. The 3 balloons that Luke popped were the most difficult. Therefore, he earned the best prize. Easy, thought Luke. He didn't even have to use his powers. Spending so much time controlling objects and throwing them telekinetically also made his normal aim better. You're great, Luke, said Enid enthusiastically. Both she and Sabrina tried to pop the balloons but failed miserably at the harder ones. Enid had a lot of strength, but her aim was horrible. Sabrina had marksmanship, but almost 0 strength. Her darts could barely hit the target. I guess with fireballs, she wouldn't need physical strength to throw them, thought Luke as the salesman handed him 2 large prizes. The prizes were 2 large stuffed animals. One was a pink bear with a happy expression. The other was a giant stuffed pumpkin with a ghoulish grin. This pumpkin stuffed animal was the prize Sabrina wanted. Luke handed her the pumpkin, and his favor was paid. Here, for you, said Luke, handing the bear to Enid. For me? Asked Enid with sparkling eyes, looking at the big pink teddy bear. It matched her outfit. Luke nodded, and Enid took the bear. Why would he want a giant pink bear? It would only earn the mockery of Xavier and his great-great-grandfather. Besides, as much as he was fulfilling a favor he owed, he couldn't in front of his girlfriend give another girl a stuffed animal and his girlfriend nothing. That was easier than expected. Your aim is pretty good. You should sign up for the archery club, Sabrina said, looking at her new stuffed animal. She noticed Luke didn't even use his powers, that's why she was praising him. Archery club? Thought Luke curiously. He knew Xavier was signed up for this club. He spotted his bow and arrows in the corner of the bedroom. With his great aim and powers, he could use a bow as a deadly weapon. Perhaps he would need metal arrows or something similar. He could propel them with his powers and have them reach great speeds, being like bullets. I could become Hawkeye in this world, Luke thought, interested. Since we accomplished the mission earlier than we thought, why don't we explore some more? Asked Sabrina. Enid first looked at Luke. Yeah, why not? Replied Luke, seeing that Enid was still in the mood to walk around and play. I saw a makeup stand. Shall we go there? Asked Sabrina again. Enid's eyes lit up when she heard makeup. Let's go, said Enid with a big smile. Both girls passed their stuffed animals to Luke and started walking excitedly to the makeup booth. Hey, since when did I become the baggage handler? Complained Luke, but he wasn't heard. He tried to follow the girls, but carrying 2 huge stuffed animals through a large crowd was difficult. Hey, be careful, yelled the boy as he was hit by Luke, who couldn't see because of the stuffed animals. Luke ignored him and kept walking, while inadvertently bumping into people. Why are there so many people? Should I throw these 2 teddies away? Thought Luke, pissed off. Finally, he was able to get out of all the crowds. He propped the stuffed animals on a bench and sat down. I lost them, thought Luke as he leaned back against the back of the bench. Well, they didn't need me for makeup. I'll wait for them and call Enid in a bit, thought Luke relaxing on the bench. 15 minutes passed. Luke was still sitting there waiting for Enid and Sabrina to return. Why aren't they back yet? Thought Luke as he started calling Enid on his cell phone. It rang and rang, but no one answered. He tried calling twice more, but no one was answering. How long can they take a makeup booth? Thought Luke doubtfully. He knew Enid spent much time doing makeup, but that was in her space, not at a fair full of people. The makeup booth shouldn't take up that much of your time. Luke lifted his head and recognized Xavier. Xavier, why are you alone? Where's Enid? Asked Xavier. She went with Sabrina to a makeup booth, and because of the crowd, I lost them. Because of these two stupid stuffed animals, said Luke, pointing his thumb at the stuffed animals next to him. Sabrina? Was it true she went with you too? Asked Xavier. Yes. How did you know? Asked Luke. He hadn't told anyone he was going with Sabrina to the festival. I ran into several friends who saw them, and they told me. I don't think Ajax liked me when he found out, said Xavier with his hand on his chin. We were with Enid. There were 3 of us. It wasn't a date with her. Her boyfriend shouldn't get jealous, Luke said with a grimace and a dismissive wave. You know their boyfriend and girlfriend? Asked Xavier. Yes. Thanks to the interrogation Enid did on her for her blog, replied Luke. Where's Bianca? Didn't you come with her? He added. Yes, but, said Xavier as he sat defeated on the bench. He began to tell him how their date was lousy and everything had gone wrong, which is why Bianca had left early. At this rate, they won't last long. I don't know how he puts up with that annoying girl, Luke thought, tapping Xavier on the shoulder. Luke was surprised at himself. In the past, it would be almost impossible for him to pat someone. You could say he considers Xavier his first friend at Nevermore. It's almost 20 minutes past, and Enid isn't answering my calls, Luke said, looking at the time. He already wanted to go back to his dorm to sleep. I know where the makeup booth is. We visited it with Bianca. Follow me, Xavier said, getting up and carrying one of the stuffed animals. Luke took the bear stuffed animal and followed him. They arrived at the makeup stand, but the 2 girls were nowhere to be seen. They approached, and Xavier asked the stall attendant if she saw 2 blonde girls. Luke chipped in by telling her about the flashy outfits Enid and Sabrina had on. Oh, the enthusiastic girl dressed in pink. Yes, she came here. Are you her friends? The manager asked, and they both nodded. Not long ago, they finished with their makeup session. I couldn't see where they went because of all the clients there, replied the woman, shaking her head. I saw them, said a boy, who was holding a couple of things and had black circles in his eyes. It seemed that helping in this stall, where only girls were passing by wanting to get their makeup done, was tiring work. Did you see where they went? No matter how many times I call her, she doesn't answer, asked Luke. Yes, they went with some guys from my school. That way, replied the boy, pointing towards the woods. The makeup stand was in the area near the forest. Are you from Jericho High School? Asked Xavier, and the boy nodded. Those kids from my school are bullies. They don't have a good reputation, least of all with Nevermore students, the boy said with some concern. You saw 2 girls go into the dark woods with bullies who hate Nevermore students, and you didn't do anything. Thought Luke. It seemed the normies didn't think very highly of them. The feeling was mutual. Let's go, said Luke, walking towards the forest, and Xavier followed him. They don't look too worried, thought the boy, scratching his head. He thought Luke and Xavier would run into the forest to save their friends from the bullies, but they weren't. Luke and Xavier weren't worried about Enid and Sabrina's safety. They would even be more concerned about the safety of the normies. Sabrina was an elemental psychic who could create a fireball easily. Enid had superhuman strength, speed, and reflexes. The bullies wouldn't last long against both girls. Should we call for an ambulance? Asked Xavier with a slight smile. He expected to find several unconscious normies on the ground. No, let them spend the night in the woods, Luke replied with a faint evil grin. These normies would learn the hard way not to bother Nevermore students anymore. Some outcasts were not very strong and could be defeated by a gang of normies, but that was not the case with Sabrina and Enid. They kept walking, heading deeper into the woods. Luke pointed out to Xavier the trail of several footprints. Why did they go so far into it? Asked Xavier. I don't know, replied Luke, shaking his head. I hope Sabrina didn't go too far. Why am I worrying about some normies? Luke thought. As for Enid, He knew she would at best give them a normal beating, but Sabrina seemed to detest normies more and could have led them deeper into the forest to teach them a harsher lesson. Before following the tracks, Luke heard something, like a whisper on the night breeze. A chilling echo echoed close to his ear. Luke! He quickly turned his head and looked in one direction of the forest. It seemed darker than the other parts, and above all more eerie. Again he heard the whisper coming from that part of the forest. The voice was barely a murmur, barely audible, but clear enough to send a shiver down his spine. Had he imagined that? Or had he heard his name, whispered with malicious intimacy? Since when did trees talk? What's wrong? Asked Xavier, looking over to where Luke was looking. Didn't you hear it? Asked Luke without looking away from the dark forest where the whisper came from. Hear what? Hey man, you're scaring me, said Xavier, looking at Luke's face. Luke knew there was a malicious presence not far behind them. He didn't know why he was so sure, but he knew something was waiting for them if they headed that way. Now, he remembered that he was in a world of terror and monsters, not just outcasts with superpowers. Luke, he heard again the whisper that seemed to be getting closer and closer. Also, he felt a distinctly hostile presence. Maybe Natasha was right, thought Luke, remembering how paranoid the redhead was. It could be his archenemies trying to assassinate him. Something's coming. I don't know what, but I don't think it's coming to greet us, Luke said, feeling the presence getting closer and closer. It seemed to be running, and he felt a great murderous intent directed towards him. What? Said Xavier, looking back in the direction Luke was watching. In the silence of the forest, he began to hear a noise through the trees. The rustle of branches snapping, the rustle of grass being trampled. Each sound echoed in the darkness, coming closer and closer to them at increasing speed. Xavier tensed. He knew this was serious. He could already feel the heavy pressure and murderous intent. Running away was useless. They would no longer have time, and they didn't seem to be able to gain speed from whatever was going to appear. Luke also braced himself. He was nervous but excited at the same time. His senses were heightened by the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He would finally have his first battle to the death. He would be able to use his powers to the fullest if his nerves didn't betray him. Finally, he could see the creature that wanted to kill him. Emerging from among the trees appeared a humanoid figure with a hunched and twisted body. It was covered in shreds of dirty cloth and rags. Deep wrinkles furrowed his pale, withered skin. His eyes glowed with a malevolent, maddening light. A hag, said Xavier, swallowing spittle and with sweat on his forehead. The hag's features were distorted and twisted, with a mouth full of sharp, uneven teeth that seemed eager to tear flesh. Its hands, with 4 fingers on each, waved in the air with a frantic trembling, as if eager to reach its prey. But most disturbing of all was the aura of madness that surrounded her, a palpable sense of imbalance and chaos that seemed to emanate from every fiber of her being. Hag, Luke thought with a frown. It was the first time he had ever seen one. He had known the term in the subject of marginal history. A hag was its origin an outcast with psychic powers, like Luke, Sabrina, Xavier, or any other psychic. How did they end up in that state? By succumbing to the corruption of their powers, becoming savage and deformed beings. Their appearance reflects the corruption they have experienced, causing them to go insane and act unpredictably. Their aggressive and savage behavior makes them dangerous. They are attracted to the flesh of children and retain enhanced psychic powers, but at a very high price. Usually dark magic. They are shunned by the outcast society for their insanity and aggressiveness, being hunted as they are a danger to outcasts and normies alike. Eyes that gave off madness looked first at Xavier and then fixed on Luke. "Luke!" shouted the witch with a deafening roar. Her shrill scream echoed through the trees and the entire forest. The leaves on the trees shook and the branches rustled as if they were being shaken by an invisible force. Luke and Xavier had to cover their ears with their hands. The shriek was too loud and high-pitched. The witch unhesitatingly lunged forward with supernatural speed. Her target was Luke. The hag's writhing fingers reach out towards Luke, eager to catch him in her grip as her raucous laughter mingles with the sound of the wind. "Stop!" thought Luke, raising his hand. The hag's 4 sharp-nailed fingers remained mere inches from Luke's face. This hag's speed was no joke. He never thought her physical attributes would be enhanced as well. His immobilization training had paid off. However, he noticed the hag squirming. He couldn't last even about 10 seconds. The hag's strength was far greater than Enid's. Knowing that he could not restrain her for long, Luke, using his telekinetic strength to the fullest, threw the hag away from him. She seemed to have been hit by an invisible gust of wind. The hag, propelled by Luke's telekinesis, shot off at a great speed until she crashed hard into a tree. A roar was heard in the place, the branches shook, and many leaves fell from the impact. That should do it, or so, I think, Luke thought with sweat on his forehead. He used all his telekinetic forces to send her flying at incredible speed. She should have a lot of broken bones. A normie would be half dead at best. It was the first time he used a deadly attack against an enemy. He had no regrets. He was saved by seconds. Otherwise, the hag's sharp nails would have stabbed him in the face. How strong would that crazy hag be? Most likely his head would have been pierced by the strength the hag demonstrated. On the other hand, to successfully immobilize her, he had to use 2 focuses. His gaze and his hand. It was a wise choice. If he had used his gaze, it would not have been as efficient. "She's dead, isn't she?" asked Xavier hopefully. The hag's aura was suffocating and intimidating. He couldn't move from his spot, though he couldn't have reacted to the attack either if he had been the target. Before Luke could respond, the hag's body began to slowly shift and rise. The sound of bones popping into place was heard. Her spine seemed broken, but she settled until she was completely straightened. "What the hell is that recovery?" Luke thought with a grimace. "I shouldn't have said anything," muttered Xavier, pulling a notebook out of one of the inside pockets of his jacket. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Luckily, he always carried his sketchbook with his pencil. The hag looked at Luke with more hatred than before and went on the attack again. Luke would attack in the same way until the hag no longer stood up. That was his simple strategy. He couldn't take out a tree and crush the hag. He still couldn't lift trees that heavy. These trees range in height from 15 to 30 meters. The lightest ones must weigh about 400 kilograms or so, a little more or a little less. He is far from being able to lift that with his 180 kilograms. He would have to have uncontrolled emotions or be on the verge of death to try. The hag lunged at incredible speed, and it looked like she would attempt the same attack, but she didn't. Halfway through, she extended her arm. Her arm was contorted and distorted, twisting in a grotesque metamorphosis. What had once been a slightly misshapen human limb had now transformed into a writhing, slimy tentacle. The tentacle lunged toward Luke with surprising speed. Its range was greater, which caught Luke off guard, and he was unable to send the hag flying as before. The horrible tentacle wrapped itself around his arm. The force was incredible. For every second, it seemed like more force wrapped around it. Before Luke could think of a way to break free of the grip, the hag sent him flying into the same tree that Luke had sent her flying. He flew and crashed into the tree. He felt a great pain in his back. Luckily, the hag's strength was less than his telekinesis. If it had been the same, he would have a broken spine and would be half dead. Did she turn her fucking arm into a tentacle? Thought Luke, gritting his teeth in pain. Luckily, his outcast status gave him a better physique than a normie, and from Natasha's training, he was used to being beaten to a pulp. I'll take that," said the hag, laughing, showing her sharp, rotten teeth. Her intelligence looked like that of a child. Taking advantage of being ignored, Xavier had already finished his drawing. In his hand, he had a simple 2D revolver, but functional. He aimed at the maniacally laughing hag and fired. Bam! 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 The hag's chest was hit by 3 bullets. The bullets went through her, and she was pushed backward by the force of the bullets. She collapsed to the ground. Xavier wanted to shoot again, but he had no more bullets. TSCH. "If only I had had more time," he muttered with annoyance. The gun in his hand melted into ink until it disappeared. He created a functional gun? Thought Luke with surprise. He had already stood up and watched as Xavier shot the hag. This Xavier seemed to be much stronger than the one in the Wednesday series, or they just didn't show his true abilities in the series. To both of their bad luck, the hag got up faster than the first time. Her angry, crazed gaze was directed at Xavier. Despite her healing, it was still painful to get shot. Before the hag lunged rapidly at Xavier, Luke had already acted. With his powers, he floated all the rocks and useful objects on the ground. Since he couldn't lift a tree with his current strength, he would have to use smaller objects. Rocks of medium, small, and large sizes floated all over the place. Without a second thought, he crushed the hag with dozens of stones and branches at an incredible speed. The hag could do nothing to dodge so many rocks and branches. All she could do was instinctively cover her head. Her body was crushed and pierced. The speed at which Luke threw these stones was not low. He could move a 180 kilograms object and throw it at a fast speed. With smaller objects, he could increase the throwing speed, reaching the speed of an average bullet. The hag ended up on the ground again with numerous holes in her body. Green blood was coming out her skin. It was a disgusting sight. Xavier took advantage and approached Luke. "Thank you for saving me. Are you okay?" he asked as he looked at Luke's condition. From his forehead was a thin line of blood and the same on his nose. "Yeah, just minor injuries," Luke replied, wiping the blood from his nose. What hurt the most was his back. Luckily, the hag's intelligence was low. If instead of throwing him, she had crushed his arm with the tentacle, his wound would be serious, and he would have a pulped arm. In the books, they didn't say that they have such a great power of recovery, said Xavier, looking toward the hag, who started to move again. This time, she got up slower than before. Luke and Xavier could see on her frightful skin several holes that gave off greenish blood. Not all the holes regenerated. Luke thought more hopefully than before. The hag was not immortal. This time it looked like she had taken a lot of damage. Not wanting to give her time to attack, Luke made a cutting movement with his hand, manipulating telekinetic waves. Despite the distance, a gust of wind rushed towards the hag's neck at high speed. The hag turned her arm into a tentacle and covered her neck. The psychic blow hit her octopus arm and did not hurt her, since she had no bones in that arm. If he was a normal person or a weaker outcast, his neck would have been snapped and the fight would have been over. Unfortunately, things were not so easy in life. Draw a large knife as fast as possible. I'll buy you time, Luke said, stepping in front of Xavier. 2 minutes will do, said Xavier, stepping back and started drawing Luke's request. Luke wanted to go back to controlling the stones, but the hag would not stand still. From her four-fingered hand, she created a cloud of black smoke that enveloped her, hiding her from Luke's view. The smoke began to spread more and more until it reached Luke and enveloped him. Luckily, it didn't reach Xavier, who had stepped away to draw. Where is she? Thought Luke, trying to stay calm. All he could see was black smoke. The only good thing about this damn smoke was that it had no poison in it, and he could breathe without a problem. Hijajiji. Luke heard an evil laugh. He looked over, but there was only black smoke. He turned his head quickly, but there was nothing there either. Get out, shouted Luke, making a cutting blow with his hand. Some smoke was dispersed, but quickly the place was engulfed in a cloud of smoke again. The hag's laughter began to be heard all around. Luke stopped trying to look for her. It was useless. In a moment, he felt a murderous intent. He managed to move backward, but was hurt. The hag's hand scratched him. Her nails were very sharp. His right forearm was marked with a scratch and bleeding. Damn it, growled Luke, feeling a burning in his forearm. The hag's laughter increased. She seemed to be playing. Luke wanted to tear her apart. He couldn't use telekinesis, as he had no vision of the objects he should move. Edgar told him that's the disadvantage of telekinetics. You have to practice a lot to be able to move objects that aren't in your vision. That's why it's so hard to fly or manipulate your own body with telekinesis. Fucking hag. No, I must calm down, thought Luke, staying still in his place. In the previous attack, he managed to sense the hag's murderous intent. Thanks to that, he managed to dodge the blow and suffer only a scratch on his arm. He didn't know what this ability was, but it was very useful. It allowed him to sense the hag's murderous intent and try to dodge the attack, regardless of whether he has a vision or not of his enemy. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It was useless to try to see through this cloud of black smoke. The hag's laughter could be heard in different places, but he didn't care. There, thought Luke, turning around and trying to dodge the hag's attack. This time he was hit too, and was just short of a perfect dodge. His right shoulder was scratched, and his clothes were torn. My trademark clothes, thought Luke with a vein in his forehead. He closed his eyes again and waited. When the hag was about to attack, her murderous intent was strongest, and that gave her away. He had to wait for that moment. Luke waited. When a murderous intent was at its peak, he knew it was time to act. He quickly took a step to the left. This time he managed to dodge successfully without taking damage. But that was not all. He took the opportunity and grabbed the hag's wrist. He pulled her towards him, and at last he could see the woman's horrible face. Her skin was greenish like Frankenstein's skin. She had a big nose and horrible warts all over her face. Fucking hag, take this, thought Luke, throwing a psychic punch in the hag's face. The hag barely had time to react as the blow impacted against her with great force. Her neck turned into a strange position. Her face, instead of looking forward, was looking back. Luke was not finished yet. In a fury at the hag for tearing his expensive clothes, he channeled his psychic energy. He reached out with both hands and summoned telekinetic waves, pushing the hag as hard as possible. The telekinetic waves hit the hag with overwhelming impact. With a scream of pain, the hag was sent flying backward like a cannonball. She crashed into a tree again, but this time with greater force than before. Sending the hag several meters backward, the cloud of smoke dissipated in a matter of seconds as her caster was no longer there. "Look here," said Xavier, who waited anxiously, watching the smoke cloud. Luckily, Luke seemed to be okay. He threw a long knife he was holding in his hand in Luke's direction. "Don't throw something so dangerous like that," thought Luke, controlling the long knife in the air and floating it towards him. He watched the knife curiously. Xavier's drawing skill was very good. As it was only a drawing made with black pencil, it was strange, but he could tell it was sharp like a real one. Without wasting any more time, he approached the hag with a knife in hand and a deep frown on his face. He knew the hag had an incredible recovery. She should possess an enhanced green aura, or who knows what. She was lying leaning against the tree. Her neck was bent. With her hands, she adjusted it. Not a pleasant scene to witness. "Let's see if you survive this," thought Luke, approaching the hag with an angry look on his face. Luke, controlling the knife with his telekinesis, directed it at high speed towards the hag's neck, who could not react in time as she was recovering. She was decapitated. Her head fell into the hollow between her legs, and green blood began to flow from her neck as if from a fountain. "That should do it, shouldn't it?" asked Luke, but he noticed that the hag's eyes kept moving, showing that they harbored life. The hag's hand tried to grab her decapitated head to put back in place, but before she did that, Luke pushed the head away with telekinesis. "We'd better amputate all her limbs," suggested Xavier with some displeasure as he saw the hag start to crawl around looking for her head. "Yeah," said Luke with a grimace. He took control of the knife again and began to cut off the hag's limbs. After a few minutes, the process was over. He cut off both arms and both legs of the hag. A grotesque scene. The most horrible thing of all was that the damned hag was still alive. Her severed limbs wanted to crawl back to her torso as best they could. "Keep them away for a while," Xavier said, taking out his notebook and pencil again. Before long, he was drawing ropes. Luke, with his telekinesis, tied all the limbs and the hag's head to a tree so they couldn't get back to her torso. Luke was reminded by this scene of when in One Piece, Luffy defeats Buggy the Clown, tying his limbs so they don't go back to his torso. Only this was much bloodier. Since there was no devil fruit, the hag did have blood and bones. "Should we burn her?" asked Xavier, looking at the gruesome scene with a raised eyebrow. As an outcast, he didn't get much of a mental shock from this scene. Just some disgust, as did Luke. "Outcast burning a hag?" asked Luke, escaping a slight chuckle. Usually, the burning of hags is done by normies, not by outcasts. Xavier also thought it was funny how ridiculous that sounded and started laughing along with Luke. A bizarre occurrence through and through. They were this close to dying tonight, but now they were laughing as they had the hag's limbless torso lying on the grass in front of them. "Luke? Xavier?" Both boys turned and looked at Sabrina and Enid, who were looking at them strangely. The girls approached. When Enid could see the hag's torso and limbs, she screamed in horror. She wasn't good at the gory stuff despite being a werewolf. "What have you done?" asked Enid, expecting the worst. They were laughing like maniacs, and there was a dismembered corpse. Her boyfriend was holding a large knife, dripping with blood. She never thought these two would hate normies so much to go to these extremes. As for Sabrina, she also wore an expression of surprise, but not horror. It seemed that the bloody scene didn't make much of an impact on her. "Take it easy, Enid. Take a good look. She's a hag, and she's still alive." Somehow, Luke said, trying to calm his girlfriend. Enid moved closer and took a closer look. She could see that the hag's head was still wide-eyed and glaring hatefully at everyone. Her limbs wanted to break free from the ropes. "A hag," said Enid, putting her hand to her mouth in surprise. "Are you okay?" asked Enid, approaching Luke and looking at him with great concern. She could see his wounds. "Just some scratches from that hag," said Luke, trying to reassure Enid. Before Enid could continue to worry about Luke, one more person appeared on the scene. "Disobeying my orders again, Luke. I don't know why I'm surprised." Everyone turned their heads towards the new person and saw a beautiful young woman with red hair and blue eyes. It was Natasha. "It's what teenagers do, isn't it?" said Luke. "You've been doing it since you were born," replied Natasha, coming closer and looking at the hag's torso. Who was she? Thought Enid in alarm. She seemed to have known Luke for a long time. In her head, she started to create many crazy stories and looked cautiously at Natasha. Natasha was a full-fledged beauty and looked to be in her mid-20s. Any man would drool just to see her. Enid's reaction was normal. Xavier became nervous as he watched Natasha so close to them. "She's my legal guardian," Luke told Enid. He knew how jealous Enid could become, so it was best to explain this as soon as possible. Luke, while fighting the hag, decided to send a telepathic message to Natasha to head here. The redhead had been looking for any trace of the Spellmans since they arrived in Jericho, so it seemed logical to tell her about this. Despite the lecture, she would give him later. As she was doing her nightly patrol in search of traces of her enemies, it didn't take long for Natasha to arrive. "How do we kill her?" "Since when did the hag have so much vitality?" asked Luke. What he learned from the hag wasn't much. Someone like Natasha would know more and could explain things better to him. Each one has different abilities. After all, when they were sane, they had a specific type of aura. This hag should have a green aura. She must have enhanced her powers through dark rituals and ended up losing her sanity, replied Natasha, making conjectures. But all the hags share the same weak point, added Natasha, pulling out a hunting knife from one of her pockets and approaching the hag's torso. Does she carry that knife with her all the time? Thought Xavier. They have their black heart in their stomach. You must always aim there. It's small. You must be precise, said Natasha, bending down and plunging the knife into her stomach. The hag's head, which was tied to a log, started screeching like never before in pain. A few seconds later, her eyes became lifeless. Her limbs became still. They were no longer moving. "You three," Natasha said, getting up as she wiped the blood off the knife with a handkerchief. "Principal Larissa is waiting for them. You must return to Nevermore. It's already late. The other students are already back," she added, looking at Xavier, Enid, and Sabrina. What about Luke?" asked Enid, reluctant to part from her injured boyfriend. "His wounds need to be tended to. He'll go later," said Natasha, leaving no more room for discussion. Enid kissed Luke goodbye with a quick kiss and returned with the other two to the festival, which was already closing. "I'm sure the hag wanted to kill me. She was calling my name, and her target was me before Xavier," Luke said once he found himself alone with Natasha. "Yes, there's no doubt it was those bastards. There were no hag sightings in Jericho before," nodded Natasha with a frown. "How do they control a hag?" asked Luke doubtfully. "The minds of the hag are corrupted and demented, but they can be controlled. Though this is no easy feat, they are savage beings who act on impulse. Controlling them is very dangerous, as they may end up attacking you," Natasha replied with a thoughtful look. "Through the blue aura?" asked Luke. Edgar told him that an advanced ability of the blue aura was mind control, the ability to control the thoughts and actions of others, similar to Harry Potter's Imperious Curse. "No, For that mind control, you need the victim's mind to be in condition. A hag's mind is corrupted and almost impossible to control with that method, Natasha replied. Then how? Red aura, replied Natasha as she began to inspect the dismembered body of the hag for anything useful. Red aura is emotional manipulation. Luke had forgotten about this aura, as it didn't seem like a big deal. On second thought, it would be easier to manipulate a hag through emotions rather than her corrupted and insane brain. Natasha found nothing useful on the hag's body or her clothing. She then made a quick inspection of the circulating area, but found nothing either. Are we going to leave the body here? Asked Luke. It wouldn't be good if the police found it, and he ended up being prosecuted for killing a deformed being. They could report him for phobia of the horrible creatures. With the times they were in, he wouldn't be surprised. In a few hours, every limb of the hag will be gone. There will be no trace of her left. What kept that rotting body alive was her black heart, Natasha said. Luke nodded. In class, they hadn't taught him much about the hag. They should have given more information. They arrived back at the festival, which had almost no people left. Just the stall keepers closing up. They went to Jericho General Hospital, where they treated Luke's wounds, which were only minor cuts and a few bruises. Natasha then called for a cab to Nevermore. This time, she accompanied Luke. Aren't you going to lecture me? Asked Luke, looking at Natasha. No. Why would I do something useless? You have done well to defeat that hag. It is no easy feat. Next time, be more careful when you go into a forest in the middle of the night, said Natasha. Oh, good, said Luke, a little surprised to be saved from the lecture. Tell Edgar about this. He'll be able to answer your doubts about the hag, said Natasha, and Luke nodded. He arrived at Nevermore. He said goodbye to Natasha, and the cab drove back to Jericho. It was already late, and he had been delayed further by being treated at the hospital. When he got to his room, Xavier was already sleeping. He was snoring like never before. He looked exhausted both from his failed date with Bianca and from being on the verge of death. Luke was tired too, but before he went to sleep, he was supposed to talk with his great-great-grandfather. Luke took the necklace from his bedside table, got into his bed, and closed the curtains so as not to wake Xavier. He put the candlestick inside and turned it on. With the curtains closed, he couldn't see anything, so he needed some light. Sitting cross-legged, he began to tactlessly shake the necklace. Wake up, quick, Luke thought with little patience. He was sleepy and had many questions that only Edgar could answer for him. You smelly brat. How many times have I told you not to be so rough waking me up? Complained Edgar, coming out of the collar. Unlike his usual classic attire, he was wearing pajamas and a nightcap. What a pathetic cap, thought Luke, looking at the triangular cap of soft, striped fabric. I was attacked at the festival, said Luke through the mental link he created with Edgar. TSCH, you deserve it, ranted Edgar, who didn't feel like talking through the mind link. He could only be heard by Luke anyway. Luke knew that his ghost great-great-grandfather was angry that he didn't take him with him to the festival and left him alone in the room. Tomorrow, I will take you. It will be livelier since it is the last day, Luke said, trying to control his expression so as not to show annoyance. Luke knew that the old man was very spiteful, and if he didn't satisfy one of his needs, he wouldn't answer his questions. You seem to be being a more filial grandson. Tell me about your attack, Edgar said after a few seconds with a slight smile. I was attacked by a hag, began Luke. After a few minutes, he finished narrating everything that happened in the forest. If she said your name and was aiming at you, there is no doubt it was the work of the Spellmans. No one else would have such a grudge against you, Edgar said. Wasn't it that they wouldn't try to murder me if I was here? Asked Luke. He didn't care much about the assassination attempt. It was exciting to fight for the first time with his powers. I told you if you were at Nevermore, they wouldn't try to assassinate you. If you ran off with your girlfriend on a date off school grounds, that's another thing, Edgar said with a smirk. Luke couldn't argue against that logic, but it's a good thing. Thanks to them, I gained battle experience, Luke said with a slight smile, remembering the battle a few hours ago. At first, seeing the hag's murderous and insane aura, he felt chills. But when he was in battle and was able to tear apart the hag that taunted him, it was a comforting feeling. Edgar looked quizzically at Luke. It had been a long time since he had trained a family successor with this kind of personality. It reminded him of himself. Instead of feeling fear because someone unseen is trying to assassinate you, he seems to want more assassins to keep sending him to continue fighting. Deathmatches are best for growth and development, Edgar said with a slight smile. However, they will now have more accurate information on your current strength. In their next plan to assassinate you, they will send someone stronger or perhaps use more stealthy methods if they continue to try, added Edgar. Yes. To control the hag, it had to have been a red aura user, right? Asked Luke. Yes. Blue aura mind control, no matter how advanced, can't control a hag who has a corrupted mind and is completely insane. A person with a red aura can control emotions. A person like a hag who is insane and driven by instincts is the easiest prey to manipulate. This doesn't mean it's easy, though. If you do it wrong, the hag may end up attacking you, Edgar replied. So are people with uncontrolled emotions or emotionally vulnerable the easiest to manipulate? Asked Luke, and Edgar nodded. For quick manipulation, yes. Also, red aura users for sane people can subtly manipulate them, without them even realizing it. That's the most terrifying thing. You can end up at their mercy, and you'll never notice. A self-aware puppet, enslaved to the red aura user. Far superior to blue aura mind control that looks like robots when you control them, Edgar explained with a straight face. That's dangerous, thought Luke, who was listening intently. It wasn't anything crazy that was superior to the blue aura's mind control. After all, the red aura was specific to emotional control. In contrast, the blue aura had multiple utilities: telepathy, mind control, mind reading, etc. Is the hag's high regeneration the same for all hags? Or is it because this hag had high regeneration? Asked Luke. He had broken her neck, tore her apart, and the hag was still alive. It wasn't a normal regeneration at all. Why do you think a psychic ends up corrupting his mind and turning into a deformed, insane being? Asked Edgar. To increase his power? Replied Luke, not quite sure. That's one reason, but not the main one. As I've told you before, psychics are the outcasts who can become more powerful than anyone else. However, we do have one fatal weakness, said Edgar. Which one? Asked Luke with a raised eyebrow. Life expectancy. Unlike vampires, werewolves, gorgons, etc., who can live over 200 years. Psychics can live between 100 and 150 years, Edgar replied. Luke knew this. The history and other outcast classes had not been entirely useless. Still, psychics could live longer than a normal human. Psychics are considered old when they are between 130 to 150 years old. For this reason, many old men and women, when they see their death coming, begin to look for methods to extend their life. It always leads to dark rituals that end very badly. Why is it that the other outcasts can live much longer and we cannot? That's their thinking, Edgar said. Luke couldn't deny that he had this thought too. Although his power could have more growth, who didn't want to live over 200 years or longer like the vampires? Ultimately, the rituals or ways they seek to increase their vitality always end up making all the hag end up having a great regeneration. Although the hag you faced was an advancing case, so it is almost certain that she possessed a green aura that boosted her regeneration, said Edgar, ending his answer. I understand. It's not all about increasing their powers, Luke said. Yes, but there are always particular cases of psychics who try to rapidly increase their powers by dark rituals and end up corrupting their minds. Not all of them are old men and women seeking immortality, said Edgar. How did she manage to transform her arm into an octopus tentacle? She also summoned black smoke out of thin air, asked Luke doubtfully. Black magic. Who knows what dark spells a hag learned to end up like that? Instead of learning the powers they have with their aura, they are greedy and want to have powers from different auras, said Edgar, shaking his head. If everyone could have two auras, the world would be very unbalanced. That's why it's so rare for a person to have dual auras. By the way, how did you defeat the hag if you couldn't see anything? Asked Edgar with a hand on his chin. If the hag had not used this method, he knew that with Luke's current telekinesis power, he could lift dozens of stones and bombard her until he had pierced the hag's heart. But in a close combat where Luke has no vision because of the smoke, the hag would have the advantage, as her physical abilities were superior to Luke, and she had a way to see through the smoke. I could sense the hag's murderous intent when she was about to attack me at just the right moment. That allowed me to dodge her attack and catch her, Luke replied. This was a strange sensation, and he didn't know what ability it was. Even before the hag arrived on the scene, he could feel her presence getting closer and closer. Something Xavier didn't detect. "What?" shouted Edgar, approaching Luke and looking at him with wide eyes. "What's going on?" asked Luke, backing away, startled by the sudden scream. "You predicted the hag's attack and felt it was easier to know where she would strike because of her murderous intent?" asked Edgar uneasily and at incredible speed. "Yes, something like that. Thanks to that, I anticipated and dodged the attack," replied Luke. "That's a white aura ability," exclaimed Edgar in disbelief. He knew it was a white aura ability as he possessed that aura when he was alive, and it was one of the abilities he possessed. "What? Really? Is that possible?" said Luke, asking several questions at once. That meant one thing. Yes, a person can possess 3 auras. "And you are one of them," replied Edgar, looking at Luke differently. He never thought he would see a person possessing 3 different auras naturally. "I possess 3 auras?" thought Luke, and a smile formed on his face. Yellow, blue, and white aura. Telekinesis, mental abilities, and clairvoyance. Records of people possessing 3 auras are super rare. In the entire history of the Poe family, there was only one person, said Edgar, who was still in shock. "Who?" asked Luke curiously. "The patriarch of the Poe family. Ezekiel Poe," replied Edgar with much respect. A week passed since Luke confronted the hag. He had his date with Enid on the last day of the festival and had to bring Edgar, who was very annoying, but he didn't mind. He was happier for possessing 3 different auras. He asked Enid about what happened to the normies in the forest, and Enid told him that Sabrina beat them up, and she was in charge of making the beating stop. He believed Enid, but it was strange that he ended up in the forest where the hag could have attacked him. He talked to Sabrina, but the girl acted the same as always, sociable and friendly, except with the normies. Returning to the subject of the 3 auras, according to Edgar, a psychic can inherit both auras from his parents. It is a very rare and rarely seen case. However, it is even rarer that in this psychic the gene of an ancestor is activated, awakening the 3rd aura. The patriarch of the Poe family, Ezekiel, was the only member of the family to have 3 different auras. Luke was the second. Both Edgar and Ezekiel had a white aura. Edgar explained to him that people with white auras can perceive extrasensory perceptions. One of these abilities is what allowed Luke to dodge the hag's deadly attacks despite not being able to see because of the smoke. A kind of sixth sense. This ability is very useful for combat. It reminded Luke of Spider-Man's spider sense or the observation of Haki in One Piece. These are useful skills for combat. In addition, clairvoyance has other utilities, such as the ability to see the aura of psychics or have a stronger spiritual connection. Luke didn't care much about the spiritual connection. He didn't want to see scary ghosts while he was taking a piss or a shit in the middle of the night. What good would it do him in a fight? It would be uncomfortable if he was taking a shit and a ghost was staring at him. Although in the future, he could work as an exorcist or ghost hunter. It could be interesting and fun. He watched a lot of movies of that nature. With his new aura unlocked, Luke began his white aura training, mostly in the skill that allowed him to defeat the hag, predicting the enemy's blows and dodging them. Luke called it observation Haki since it didn't have a name. He was not ashamed to give this name to this ability. He was a big fan of One Piece in his past life. In this world of outcasts and monsters, there was no One Piece, so he didn't mind giving this name to this skill. In this world of normies and outcasts, works of his past life did not exist as Stephen King's books or One Piece. History changed because there were humans with powers and monsters. However, some works were repeated, such as Edgar's or Bram Stoker's works. The initial training to improve this skill was simple. Be blindfolded and have someone beat you to a pulp. You must try to dodge the blows. According to Edgar, it is important to remember that every enemy attack carries an intent and a clue. Luke trained with Enid. It was much harder to dodge his girlfriend's blows, as she had no murderous intent against Luke like the hag. But he had no other hag to train this skill with, so he had to do it this way. The fight against the hag brought more benefits besides awakening his third aura. His telekinetic abilities had improved. Several months ago, his weight progress was slow, i.e., being able to move objects with his telekinesis. Thanks to his death match, he managed to overcome this slow progress and reach 195 kilograms. Although he did not move very heavy objects in the fight against the hag, his mind was in tension and stress. He managed to improve and overcome the limit he couldn't before. How did he know he could move 195 kilograms? In Nevermore, besides the gym where they train fencing, there's another gym, a place to train full of weights and discs. Some discs weigh 25 kilograms each, and there are dozens of them. Luke goes here and moves these discs with his telekinesis to find out what his current limit is. He does this at night when the gym is empty. He is very close to reaching 200 kilograms. In the yellow aura, some levels categorized how much weight the psychic could move. This was a sort of power scale that was universally accepted. There are 7 levels in total. Level 1 is the lowest of all, the beginners or newly initiated. These telekinetics can move objects from 1 kilogram up to a maximum of 50 kilograms. Luke's partner Rowan, who had a yellow aura in his presentation some time ago, could move 40 kilograms. He was close to passing level 1 and entering level 2. That figure is usually considered a good talent. Luke at that time could move 180 kilograms and did not improve until now, as he was at a bottleneck, so to speak. Level 2 is moving objects between 50 kilograms to 200 kilograms. This is Luke's current level, and he is almost at the top. In the next few days or weeks, he will be able to reach 200 kilograms and finally enter level 3. From what Edgar told him, his father, when he was his age, could move up to 140 kilograms, and his talent was considered one of the best in Nevermore and the American underworld. So Luke had a monstrous talent when it came to moving objects with his telekinesis. Let this go to Luke's head. Edgar told him that he too had that talent at his age, and by the records, the patriarch Ezekiel was the same. So he was not unique and had to keep his feet on the ground. He didn't want his great-great-grandson to be arrogant and in a battle to the death get overconfident and end up dying. However, this scale did not mean that someone of level 3 would win 100% against someone of level 2, as it is only based on the weights a person can move. In a battle, it is not only objects that will be thrown left and right. There are many more factors and telekinetic techniques possible to use. For example, immobilization. The level 3 psychic may not have a great command of this technique. If the level 2 psychic has a great mastery of this technique, he could defeat the level 3 psychic despite being able to move fewer kilograms/pounds. Another example would be the amount of objects at the same time that you can control and the speed they reach. Maybe the level 3 psychic can move 300 kilograms, but not on many objects. On the other hand, the other psychic has more practice with many objects at the same time, and his throwing speed is higher. That's why it's important that in training you don't just try to move a single object heavier. What's the point of moving 200 kilograms if you can't move 20 objects of 10 kilograms each at the same time? Maybe in battle, there's not one object that weighs 200 kilograms, and you are ruined. In the other auras, they also tried to make a similar power scale, but with different measurement parameters. The problem was that in some auras, it was very difficult since it is not as easy as telekinesis, where you move heavier and heavier objects. For example, in the blue aura, there were a lot of mental abilities. How do you rank that? With the red aura, how do you measure the user's ability to manipulate a person? Those are difficult things to measure and make a ranking. So, the current rankings are not very accurate. Psychics won't be willing to tell you the extent of their abilities so you can make an accurate ranking. Finally, over 200 kilograms, Luke muttered with sweat on his forehead as 8 by 25 kilograms discs and 1 by 5 kilograms discs dropped to the gym floor. A total of 205 kilograms. It was late at night, and he was alone training in the gym. "Welcome to level 3. Well done," said Edgar, looking at his great-great-grandson with some pride. "Thank you. By the way, What level did you reach when you were alive? Asked Luke curiously. He knew his great-great-grandfather possessed a yellow aura, in addition to the white one. I already told you that the ranking is not very accurate, but if we take into account only the amount of weight I could move with my telekinesis, I reached the top of level 5, answered Edgar. Just that? I thought you would have minimally reached level 6, said Luke. He knew his great-great-grandfather was a very powerful and famous outcast when he was alive. Only that, repeated Edgar with a vein on his forehead. Level 5 is something achieved by few psychics in the whole world, he added. You'd find yourself at the top of the food chain. Besides, I was only 40 years old, he said with a slightly arrogant smile. Well, it's true. He had 100 years and a bit more to live. He could have made it to level 6, thought Luke, looking at his ancestor differently. If you were at the top of the food chain, why did you die? Asked Luke with a raised eyebrow. That scoundrel Edward Spellman reached level 6 thanks to his demonic pact. Besides, that it was 2 versus 1. That's how they defeated me. The deal not only improved his ability to move objects, but also his other abilities, Edgar replied with hatred in his eyes. Luke already knew the name Edward Spellman. His great-great-grandfather had mentioned him before, and whenever he did, it was to insult or rant against this person. He was the head of the Spellman family in Edgar's time, and his arch-nemesis, who murdered him, started the grudge between the two families. He's dead, isn't he? Asked Luke. Edgar was born around 1800. Considering Edward was of the same generation, he must have died in about 1950 or so. He is alive. The deal with the demon not only improved his powers, but also extended his life expectancy. So you'll have to get to level 6 if you want to defeat him, Edgar replied matter-of-factly. Doesn't he have too high expectations? Luke thought with a frown. He wanted a 14-year-old to defeat a 150-plus-year-old psychic who made a deal with a demon. Not only that, the Spellman family continued to function unlike the Poes. They had more family members to fight. In contrast, Luke was on his own. His only companion was Natasha. Didn't he go bonkers? Like the hag? Asked Luke. No, deals with demons don't make you lose your sanity. However, they do have other disadvantages which I'll tell you about later. Many psychics who want to increase their lifespan would rather use dark rituals and the possibility of becoming insane than make a deal with a demon, replied Edgar. Why not now? Thought Luke, but he didn't say anything. He knew Edgar wouldn't talk about demons if he didn't want to. He's very stingy with the information he tells him. The patriarch Ezekiel, did he reach level 7? Asked Luke. It is not known. In his time, there were no such rankings. So, there is no record of what level he reached. I would estimate that minimally he made it to level 6. In my time, there was no record of people reaching level 7. Level 6 is considered the peak, and the people here are very few. Besides Edward, who made a pact with a demon to get there, there must be 10 psychics or less at level 6 alive today, replied Edgar. So few? Worldwide? Asked Luke in amazement. In the USA? Replied Edgar. Then it was true that he was at the highest in power, thought Luke, looking more respectfully at Edgar. He was at the peak of level 5 and possessed another aura. And he was only 40 years old. His great-great-grandfather, despite having possessed one less aura than Ezekiel, is on par with the patriarch of the Poe family. Luke was sitting cross-legged on his bed. His eyes were closed, and he was breathing calmly. He was meditating. Not a normal meditation. He didn't like that sort of thing. It was a meditation to enhance his blue aura. He never thought he would train meditating similar to Chinese cultivation novels. He didn't have much choice. How do you improve your blue aura, which is related to mental abilities? He cannot control, move, and throw heavier and heavier weights, as in his telekinesis. Edgar passed him the meditation method his mother used, and the results were not long in coming. The distance he could hold telepathic conversations had reached a staggering 35 kilometers in a lifespan of 4 months. His photographic memory was also much improved. This made it easier for him to do his homework at Nevermore. He hardly needed to study. 10 minutes passed, and an alarm went off on his cell phone. Luke opened his eyes slowly. Meditation over, he muttered, stretching and standing up. Xavier wasn't in the bedroom. He must be at his club, Luke thought. Just then, Edgar's ghost came out of the necklace on the bedside table. "How did the meditation go?" asked Edgar. "Fine, I guess," replied Luke. "Teach me something useful for the blue aura, like mind reading or mind control," added Luke hopefully. He was already tired of meditating to improve his telepathy and photographic memory. His photographic memory was already very advanced. He could even remember things accurately from many years ago and from his past life, like when he read Carrie or older works. As for telepathy, he did not have much use for it. With the current mastery he had now, it was enough. The only thing he needed it for, and saw it as useful, was to keep in contact with Natasha in case the Spellmans attacked him or her. No one besides Natasha and Edgar knows he has a blue aura, so he can't use telepathy. If he decides to tell someone about his telepathy, it could be Enid or Xavier, but he doesn't see the point in telling them this. It could cause a card up his sleeve to leak out, and he doesn't want that. With them, he can use cell phones, and they live at the school. He didn't see the point of creating a telepathic link. "I can't," Edgar said, shaking his head. "Why not? It's a waste of the blue aura if I only use it for telepathy and photographic memory," Luke said with a grimace. At this time, he realized that learning skills are harder than one would think. You would think that someone with a blue aura could read minds easily, but that's not the case. You need to know the technique, and for that, you need a person to teach you or a book. He tried to read minds by staring at strangers, but nothing happened. He just created misunderstandings. As for Nevermore, they don't teach him much either. Every technique seems to be very guarded by the psychic families. The practical is very little. For example, in telekinesis, Luke would only practice moving objects and nothing else. They would never teach him immobilization or other more advanced techniques. They just guide you to get better at the techniques you already mastered instinctively or learned from your family. In other words, Luke was spared from encountering his great-great-grandfather's ghost, or he would have been screwed. It would have been very difficult to learn telepathy or improve his photographic memory. "I don't remember what the methods of such techniques are like," replied Edgar, scratching his mustache with some embarrassment. "Didn't you teach a lot of psychics? You should know the techniques." "Just do memory," said Luke. "You're the 8th one I've trained, and the 2nd one to have a blue aura. The first was my brother's son. Do you know how many years ago that was? I don't have a photographic memory like you. Usually, members of the Poe family don't have a blue aura. So, I'm not a specialist in that area. Luckily, I got your mother's method for telepathy and photographic memory since she married your father. But the other techniques were more secret, and she didn't have time to pass them on," Edgar explained. "So I'll just use my blue aura for telepathy and photographic memory?" asked Luke with a grimace. "No, that would be a waste. There are 2 ways for you to learn techniques like reading or mind control," said Edgar. "Which ones?" asked Luke impatiently. "The first is through your mother's family," replied Edgar. "Are they still alive?" "If they're, they should have the methods for the techniques," said Luke with a hand on his chin. His mother had a blue aura. She must have learned her techniques from somewhere. He didn't know anything about his family from his mother's side. "Of course they're alive," Edgar said with a frown. "Well, then I should just get in touch with them and ask them for a couple of secret texts." "What could possibly go wrong?" said Luke in a sarcastic tone. He knew something was wrong. His existence had been made known for several months now, and none of his relatives on his mother's side of the family approached him. They would most likely ignore him. It would be difficult for them not to know of his existence since he is famous. Your mother's family never agreed to her marrying your father. Not because they would hate your father. Because of his last name, Edgar explained. The Poe surname is well respected among the outcasts and the world at large, Luke said, confused. Yes, but in the outcast world, everyone noticed that Poe's family members were dying. Do you think no one noticed that? The most powerful outcast families are aware that there is some conflict between the Spellmans and the Poes, even if they don't know the details. Makes sense, Luke nodded. Your mother's family didn't want to make an enemy of the powerful Spellman family, so they forbade her to marry your father, but she disobeyed them, so she was exiled, said Edgar. If it had been in earlier years, they might have taken the risk and lent a hand to the Poe family, Luke thought. In his father's time, which wasn't that long ago, his father was the last living member of the Poe family that was about to collapse. Why would they help a family that was at the gates of the abyss? Gone was their former power and wealth. There was only one member left alive. It was too risky a gamble. That's why they didn't visit you. At first, they might think you had died with your parents, but now they should be aware that you survived and are here, Edgar said, sighing. I don't need their help, Luke said, clicking his tongue. They abandoned their mother. They were cowards. They were better off ignoring him. He would never ask them for help. What's the second option? Asked Luke. Don't you want to know the name of your mother's family? Asked Edgar. No, they abandoned her. I have nothing to do with them, replied Luke. Fine. The second way is for you to join the Nightshade Society, said Edgar with a mysterious smile. What is that? Asked Luke with a strange look on his face. He already knew what it was, but he had to act like he didn't know anything. It's a nevermore secret society. It was founded by Goody Adams, a powerful psychic older than me. Although when she founded the society, Nevermore didn't yet exist, and its purpose changed over time. The important thing is the library in the place where they meet, Edgar explained. Wednesday's ancestor, thought Luke. In that library, will there be books with the techniques I'm looking for? Asked Luke. Yes. It's an elite social club. Their library is hundreds of years old. Its members were leaving very useful books to be used only by the members of the society, replied Edgar. Going in will be too much trouble. I'd better sneak into the living room and steal the books. Then I'll return them. One read will do, Luke said. He had no desire to join an elite social club. Besides, he knew this club was useless now since they only used it for social gatherings. They had lost many privileges since a normie died a few years ago. The normie that killed Morticia Adams. No, you must officially enter. It's a tradition. Every member of the Poe family went in. You can't break a tradition of hundreds of years, Edgar said stubbornly. How annoying, thought Luke. Maybe he'll sneak in and enter the society without telling Edgar. He already knows how to get in thanks to the show. How do I get them to accept me? Asked Luke with a barely visible grimace. You must stand out to get their attention. I don't think that will be difficult for you, Edgar replied with a slight smile. That's your current mission. Enter the Nightshade Society, he added as he stepped back into the collar. I don't care about family tradition, Luke thought. One of these days, he would visit Edgar's statue and enter the Nightshade Society. It would be too much of a hassle to get the attention if he doesn't know who to get an invitation. One night, Luke went to the statue of his great-great-grandfather. The statue of Edgar held a book in one hand, and on his wrist was a raven. Luke planned to borrow a couple of books. Then he would return them. He knew he would have to snap his fingers twice for the statue to shift and show the hidden entrance. They're not having a meeting, are they? Thought Luke, who was dressed appropriately for the situation. He black overalls with the hood covering his head, gloves, pants, and a black scarf covering half his face. It was late at night on a Monday. It was only a couple of hours before the school day started. It would be strange if they had a meeting at this hour. Without another thought, he snapped his fingers twice. Instantly, the statue began to recede, showing him a hidden passage. The place was dark, so he used a flashlight on his cell phone. Luke started down a staircase, just like Wednesday did in the series. On the way, he saw a lot of portraits of people he didn't know. He came to a room where in the center was the symbol of the Nightshade Society, a black skull with a star or something similar. In one of the pictures on the walls of the room, he could see Mr. and Mrs. Adams, Wednesday's parents. Without wasting any more time, he headed for the libraries, which had hundreds of books piled high with dust. Hundreds of years made them have quite a collection, Luke thought, looking at the shelves full of books. He began to look to see if the shelves had any distinctions, so he would know what category was on each shelf. Since it would take forever if he searched book by book, there would not only be things about psychics and auras, but also other types of outcasts or history books. Luckily, he found small metal plates placed on the shelves, each with a different inscription. He approached the first plaque and read, Werewolves. As expected, there were books dedicated to werewolves. As it wasn't what he was looking for, he moved on to the next shelf. On the plaque, it said, Vampires. He kept looking until he finally found the shelf he needed, the one for psychics. That's a lot of books, he thought. Looking at the tall bookshelf, he started browsing through several books. His goal was to find books that talked about the blue aura and showed methods to learn useful techniques. Preferably mind control and mind reading. It took him almost an hour to find the books that would be useful to him. It took so long because the damn books had no titles, no cover. He got a book that talked about mind reading. Another was on mind control, and the last one talked about mental protection. Very useful stuff. He didn't want someone reading his mind if he could help it. Mission completed, Luke thought with a slight smile. Now he was to go back to his room and read the books completely. Then he would return them. Just then he heard several footsteps coming toward his location. Shit. Luke nervously looked around, looking for a place to hide. Luckily, he found a large, dirty closet in time. He propped the books on the floor of the closet. It would be awkward to wait with 3 heavy books until people left, and he might make a telltale noise. Why would they have a meeting at 4 in the morning? Thought Luke with a grimace. If he could avoid it, he'd rather not fight. But if he had no choice, he'd fight his way out. As he left the closet doors slightly open, he could see that it was 2 people. They were chatting and laughing amicably. Did they know they had entered the lair of a secret society? He expected to find a group of cultists in masks and cloaks, but it was a boy and a girl kissing and fooling around. I told you the best place to do it is here. We won't bother anyone, the boy said with a smile as he placed kisses on the girl's neck. I don't know, Tommy. It's where we always meet with the club, said the girl with some doubt, but she could be seen enjoying the kisses the boy was giving her. Come on, Veronica. No one will find out. We can't do it in the dorms. The best place is here. Or do you want to do it outdoors? Asked Tommy with a playful smile. Well, all right, said Veronica. They stopped at the symbol of the Nightshade Society and began kissing passionately. The kisses each time went higher and higher. Tommy's hand reached down and started groping Veronica's ass. Luke was watching all of this in the foreground. The closet was not far away, and they had stood in the center of the symbol kissing. Although the lighting was dim, it was enough to see them. All the place could hear was the kissing and faint sighs of the couple. Luke couldn't believe his eyes. 2 outcasts about to have sex in the prestigious former Nightshade Society headquarters. If Goody Adams knew about this, she'd be rolling over in her grave. Luke recognized a girl, a very popular older student. Her name was Veronica Umbrio. Her popularity was among the highest in the school, surpassing Bianca and Sabrina. This is due to her appearance, perfect grades, and above all possessing a double aura. Of all the psychics at Nevermore, only 2 were known to possess a double aura. How do you know all this? Thanks to Enid. Otherwise, he wouldn't even pay attention to a Nevermore student, as it wasn't something he was interested in. Since Veronica was one of the most popular people, Enid, the most gossipy person at Nevermore, had a lot of information about her for her blog. As for the boy, he has no idea who he is. He must be the stereotypical popular guy, since he is hitting on the most popular girl. Only, with a few twists, since he's an outcast. Luke was reminded of Brad and his girlfriend. Not a pleasant memory. Outcasts acting like normies. What a joke, Luke thought, looking at the pair. He saw no difference between the 2 species. They were still teenagers with no control over their hormones. The couple lay down on the floor where the symbol of society was and began to undress. Are they going to? Thought Luke. Although he knew that teenagers, including himself, had more uncontrolled hormones, he would never do such an act in a place he considered sacred. Carefully, he pulled out his cell phone and selected his camera. Luke began to get photographic and video evidence, while the couple was engrossed in the carnal act atop the noble symbol of the Nightshade Society. Why was he getting photos and videos of the carnal act between Veronica and Tommy? Just in case. If he was caught stealing the books, he would have a means to blackmail them and save himself from possible punishment. He could even continue blackmailing them in the future. Luke doesn't know how long it was before they were done. The couple lay on the floor. Veronica leaned against Tommy's chest. Get the fuck out of here already. Stop defiling this place, Luke thought grumpily. He wanted to sleep, and these idiots looked like they would fall asleep naked on the floor, as if they were at home. 10 minutes later, they got dressed and left the place amid laughter, as if they had performed the most rebellious act of their lives. Luke waited 10 more minutes to make sure they didn't come back in case they forgot any items or anything like that. Then he left the place, taking the 3 books with him. The mission was completed. In the following days, he began to read the books. A serious reading would be enough to remember them in their entirety, thanks to his photographic memory. It took a little longer, as the information was complex. Edgar was pissed when he found out that Luke stole the books from the Nightshade Society and went on a big rant, telling him that he should join like all members of the Poe family. Luke stood his ground. He would not join that society, and certainly not after witnessing two members having sex in the society's main room. A useless club. Maybe when Goody Adams created it, it served a purpose, but now it was bullshit just for show among popular and elites. A few days after stealing the books from the Nightshade Society, Luke was walking with Enid holding hands down a hallway. At that moment, he was stopped by a boy with glasses, freckles, and short stature. Luke and Enid stopped talking and looked at the boy, who seemed to have a nervous look on his face. "Why, you're Luke Poe, right?" asked the boy, stuttering and looking at Luke nervously for some reason. "Yes. What do you want?" asked Luke impatiently, making the freckled boy more nervous and harder to speak. "The rumors are true. His aura is scary," thought the nervous boy as he fiddled with his hands. This wasn't just due to Luke's popularity and the rumors that he was rude and moody. The battle Luke and Xavier had against the hag spread like wildfire throughout the school. Although no one knows how real the rumor is, out there it got around that he and Xavier defeated the hag. Some people believed it, others did not. Xavier felt ashamed, as in the battle he had done almost nothing. "Be nicer. He's a senior," muttered Enid, elbowing Luke. "Ouch," Luke complained. "Veronica wants to see you," finally said the freckled boy. "Veronica Umbrio?" asked Enid with her mouth hanging open. Everyone knew her, even the younger students. The boy nodded. Luke and Enid looked at each other knowingly. Luke had told Enid that he went into the Nightshade Society and stole 3 books. In the process, he saw Veronica and another student kissing and having sex. "This is bad, Luke. She must know you stole the books. They wouldn't be a Centennial Club if you could steal the books that easy," whispered Enid, turning around next to Luke to talk without being overheard. "Yes, it's true. It would be straightforward to rob them. Don't worry. I have the video to defend myself," Luke whispered with a slight smile. Enid's cheeks flushed as she remembered the video Luke showed her. "I could threaten her by saying you'll upload it on your famous blog," Luke added with a wicked grin. Enid's blog was seen by almost the entire school. "I'm not uploading that perverted video to my blog," whispered Enid, tapping Luke. "Just kidding," said Luke with a slight smile. "But she won't be able to threaten me for stealing the books. So I'll be fine," he added. "It's true. Remember, they're older students. Be nice." "Good luck," Enid said, giving him a quick kiss and saying goodbye. She knew it wouldn't be helpful, and it would be not good if Veronica knew that more people saw the video. Besides, she knows her boyfriend's strength is far superior. He defeated a crazy hag. They won't be able to do much to him, no matter how much they are older students. "Lead the way," said Luke, walking towards the freckled boy. "What? You're not going to ask why?" asked the confused boy. "No. Come on. I don't have all day," replied Luke with a scowl and unfriendly face. Enid was no longer there for him to be nice to others. "Why, yes," said the boy, starting to walk. After walking for a while, Luke, guided by the freckled boy, came to a dimly lit hallway and a bench. On the bench sat Veronica with her legs crossed. Next to her were 2 more girls. Behind the bench as bodyguards were 2 burly boys who looked at Luke with menacing looks. When they arrived and stood in front of Veronica, 2 more boys came out of the columns, positioning themselves behind Luke. "Don't they want me to run away?" thought Luke, amused. "I brought the boy." "Veronica," said the freckled boy more nervously than before. Luke looked at the girl, who had an arrogant demeanor. Her hair was straight black, with long eyelashes, amber eyes, and flawless skin. "You've been late, Snoopy," Veronica said, looking up from her cell phone. "Snoopy? Why is he named after a dog?" thought Luke, looking at the boy who seemed more nervous about being watched by Veronica. For some reason, his cheeks were slightly flushed, even though he was being reprimanded. "Damn, you kept Veronica and the girls waiting," said a tall, muscular boy grabbing Snoopy by the collar. Sorry," said Snoopy with fear and trembling in his tone. "It's all right, Brad. Let go. He's kind of cute when he's shaking so much," said the red-haired girl next to Veronica. The girl had 2 pigtails and an amused look on her face as she licked a lollipop. "TSCH. You always hide behind women, said Brad with contempt, pushing Snoopy. Hiding behind women or being an obedient dog to women? Asked Luke with a hand on his chin. What? Asked Brad blankly. I'll put it simpler for you. You despise him for hiding behind a woman, but you obey that woman as if you were an obedient dog. Since when are werewolves domesticated dogs? Said Luke with a smile full of disdain. It was easy to tell that Brad was a werewolf. His sharp nails gave him away, along with his violent temper. He's defending me, thought Snoopy in surprise. Well, on second thought, Snoopy is also a domesticated dog that obeys her commands. I guess you're on a higher level, added Luke, shaking his head. Snoopy, you fucking brat, snarled Brad angrily, lunging towards Luke, but just then Veronica spoke. Stop. Brad's hand came within inches of reaching Luke, who decided to despise him because his name was Brad, a name he didn't like. That's it. Obey, dog, Luke said with a smile. Brad had a vein in his forehead, but seeing Veronica's unperturbed look, he did nothing and walked away. Ha ha ha, this kid is so funny, laughed the redhead, unable to believe how rude Luke was to older students. What do you need me for? I'm a busy person, Luke said with no patience. As for busy, he was lying. He had already finished his training and planned to play video games. The redhead's laughter died down, and she looked at Luke with a murderous glare. The whole place went silent. Luke was being watched by older students who seemed to want to kill him with their eyes, but he didn't flinch. His posture remained relaxed. Your arrogance trumps hearsay. I guess having the last name Poe and being a somewhat famous writer made your fame go to your head, Veronica said with a slight smile, breaking the silence. I guess being Miss Umbrio family and having a double aura makes you arrogant, Luke said with a slight sneer. The Umbrio family, besides being a family of psychics, possess great wealth in American normie society. They have a leading investment firm that manages a portfolio of financial assets. Their fortune is in the millions. Luke will never put his head down and does not feel inferior to Veronica. Although the Umbrio family is a millionaire, their history in the world of outsiders is inferior to Poe's history. If one had to make a top in terms of the most important outcast families in history, the Poe family would be at the top of it all with the Spellmans, the Adams, and a few others. Did Veronica have 2 auras? Yes, but he had 3. The only thing she could win on was that the Poe family had only 1 member and was broke in money matters. But that's because they had a war against the Spellmans, another high-grade family. Enough of this useless talk. Return the books you stole, accept your crime, and your punishment will be light if I'm in a good mood, Veronica said with a smile, wanting to see Luke's expression of surprise and fear, but his face didn't change. Books? I don't know what you're talking about, Luke said, playing dumb. Internally, he was surprised. No one saw him when he stole the books. How did they know? Don't play dumb. You think Nightshade Society books can be stolen so easily, said the other girl sitting next to Veronica, speaking for the first time. Unlike the redhead who had a playful aura or Veronica, who had airs of nobility and arrogance. This girl had shoulder-length black hair and an icy stare. Those are slanders and insults to my person. Where's the proof? Asked Luke. We have proof. We just have to show it to the principal. Stealing from the Nightshade Society is no light crime, said the same girl in a cold tone. Daphne, don't scare him, said the redhead with an amused smile. As if that society shit is the big deal, Luke thought with a grimace. He watched as they desecrated the main room of the society, and the culprit stood next to them. From the girl's expressionless tone, it seemed that they really did have a way to charge him and make him guilty. That would not be good. He doesn't want to be punished. He had to use his secret card. Just give the books back, kid, said another burly boy, putting his hand on Luke's shoulder and squeezing hard. Luke looked at him, and from 1 second to the next the boy shot backwards until he hit a pillar. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. The boy lay on the ground, unconscious. Luke adjusted his strength. If he used his full power as he did against the hag, he could have done more damage. Although the boy was an outcast, his vitality couldn't compare to that hag. Only my girlfriend can touch me, Luke said, wiping his shoulder. Son of a bitch, shouted Brad, lunging at Luke, throwing a powerful punch. The one who had just been beaten to a pulp was his best friend. Your murderous intent is very high, thought Luke, dodging the blow easily. The speed was faster than Enid's, but thanks to his observation hockey, dodging it was easy. Luke threw a hook at Brad, who couldn't do anything and was hit. His head jerked back, but it wasn't enough. His werewolf stamina was too much, and Luke's physical strength was no big deal. Weak, growled Brad, lunging at Luke again. However, just as he was about to hit Luke, he felt his whole body being immobilized. He couldn't move. Luke extended his hand, pointing at Brad, who began to float, rising higher and higher, moving away from the ground, until at one point he descended at full speed toward the ground. Brad's body hit the ground at a great speed. He felt his nose break and felt a great pain in all his bones. Fucking, said Brad, trying to stand up. Luke extended his leg back and without a second thought kicked Brad full in the face. His kicks didn't stop until Brad was unconscious. Werewolf endurance is admirable, Luke said, and the place went silent. His left white sneaker was left full of blood. Snoopy looked at Luke with wide eyes and sweat on his forehead. He was amazed at Luke's strength, but more so at his brutality. You're crazy, Veronica said in an icy tone. She tried to be nice to a first-year student, but he ground her servants to the ground. Crazy me? Don't act like a normie. We're outcasts, Luke said with a slight excited smile. This was refreshing. At his previous normie school, he couldn't have acted this way. Didn't he live in normie orphanage? They all thought, looking at Luke like he was a maniac. I got too excited, thought Luke, covering his smile and returning to his normal expression. He's been smiling more lately. That's a good thing, right? You stole 3 books and attacked 2 students. Pray you don't get expelled, Veronica said with an icy stare. Yeah, whatever you say. Now get those 2 over here, Luke said, waving his hand at the 2 boys standing behind the girls as bodyguards. Both boys had cold sweat on their foreheads. They knew they were weaker than Brad and the other boy. They would have no chance of beating Luke and his powerful telekinesis. They would have to transform completely, and it's not a full moon. Then it will be your turn, girls. I wonder how powerful a 2-aura user will be, added Luke, feeling his excitement rising. Being expelled? Luke wasn't worried about that issue. He knew he wouldn't be expelled. First of all, it was several 10th graders versus 1 9th grader. He could tell he did it in self-defense. And he had a very good relationship with Principal Weems. But this was unimportant since he wouldn't have charges against him. He will blackmail Veronica with the video, so she won't press charges. Before that, he will fight these arrogant students who came after him first. Veronica stood up from her seat and stared at Luke. The 2 students behind her sighed in relief. Let's go. Get those 2 up. Let's go see Principal Weems, said Veronica, starting to walk. The easiest way to take care of Luke is to show his crimes to the school authority. The 2 boys quickly carried the unconscious boys, making no contact with Luke, and quickly follow Veronica and the other 2 girls. What a bore, thought Luke disappointedly. That's right. I stole the books, Luke said in a high tone. Veronica paused, but only for a second. She would no longer accept Luke's apology. Now she would have him severely punished for trying to defy her. I remembered something very funny. While stealing the books, I witnessed a scene I never thought I'd see, Luke said with an acted laugh. A boy named Tommy and a girl, added Luke with a smile, and Veronica quickly turned around with wide eyes. Do you know Tommy? The redhead asked. Daphne, the expressionless girl, looked at Veronica confused. Why was she so surprised? Not very. I saw him committing a nasty act, replied Luke, staring at Veronica, who for the first time had a nervous expression. Don't tell me the night he stole the books was when Tommy and I... thought Veronica, feeling her heart rate rise. A nasty act? Asked Daphne with a raised eyebrow. Let me show you. I recorded the whole thing, Luke said as he pulled out his cell phone and continued to stare at Veronica. You girls go back. Don't report to Luke. I'll take it from here, said Veronica in a different tone than usual. Are you okay? Asked the redhead, looking quizzically at her friend and leader, who always kept her cool except now. Did something happen with Tommy? Asked Daphne. Get back. I got this, exclaimed Veronica, giving off an intimidating aura. Her friends agreed without knowing what was going on and left the scene with the others. When Luke was left in the hallway alone with Veronica, he played the video on his cell phone. A few moans could be heard that made Veronica blush. The camera on the latest iPhone is very good. I can see your expressions with great definition, Luke said with a wicked grin. Don't move. I already have several copies. It's useless if you steal my cell phone, added Luke, who noticed Veronica was about to make a move. Why you were on that night? Asked Veronica, still in place. Yes, I was able to hide just in time in a dirty closet. I never thought you would commit such an act on top of the noble symbol of the Nightshade Society, replied Luke, acting exaggeratedly on the noble side. What do you want? I won't rat you out to the principal that you stole the books. Do you want to join the Nightshade Society? With the support of several members, I can get you in, said Veronica. Join that society? I don't want that. Just keep it under the rug that I stole the books. I'll get them back to you, said Luke. Veronica was surprised that Luke refused to join the elite club. Any student who knows of its existence from myths or family wants to join the club. Have you read the books yet? Asked Veronica. Not yet. I'll get them back to you in a few days, Luke replied without further explanation. If this gets to the principal's ears and I get detention, the video of you and Tommy having sex will be seen by the whole school, said Luke in a threatening tone. You wouldn't mind uploading the video. Veronica looked around as Luke said sex wouldn't be good for anyone to overhear their conversation. Luckily, the hallway was empty. The perfect Miss Veronica Umbrio having sex on the floor like a savage. In the noble hall of the century-old elite club. What would Goody Adams say? Or your parents? Asked Luke with a smirk. This arrogant idiot tried to threaten him and thought she had everything under her control. He had to show her place. No, please don't, said Veronica in desperation. Her life would be over. Her family would find out and might see the video. She would be a disgrace. I won't, as long as you don't cause me trouble. I'll ask you for a book or two. As long as you give it to me, the video won't get out, said Luke, putting the cell phone away. Unlike many scoundrels, he was a man of his word. He threatened her since he was caught, and they knew he stole the book. But mostly because they came across as very arrogant, as if they were superior to him. When will you delete the video? Asked Veronica. When I want to. Write down my number. I may need a book in a few days, said Luke, passing his contact to Veronica, who had no choice but to accept. You can't release the video. We're family. You can't disgrace the family name. It will affect you too, said Veronica, trying to use one last card to see if she could save herself and have the video deleted. Luke, for the first time, had a puzzled look on his face. What are you saying? Are you out of your mind why your popularity can fall to pieces? Asked Luke, confused. Don't play dumb. Your mother, Sophie, belonged to the Umbrio family. She was my aunt, and I'm your cousin, exclaimed Veronica. My mother belonged to the rich Umbrio family? Her brother is Veronica's father, which makes her my cousin, thought Luke with a surprised expression. Don't talk nonsense, Luke said in disbelief. You don't know? Almost the whole school knows that your parents were from the Poe family and the Umbrio family, said Veronica, looking at Luke with a strange expression. Luke had a question mark on his face. He wasn't one of the people who paid the most attention around him. He's sure Enid never brought this up. He must have asked Edgar when he had the chance. Natasha never said anything to him, and she was the closest to his mother. He didn't ask her either, though. Let's say you're right. So what? You think I'll delete the video? Asked Luke. Later he would confirm if this was true. But we're family, said Veronica. Family? The first family member who approaches me tries to threaten me. Besides, you didn't help my mother when she needed it and exiled her. I have no relationship with you, Luke said in a cold tone. Keep your pets under control, and if I ask for a book, bring it to me. That way your social life will be safe, added Luke, turning away and leaving Veronica alone. Luke confirmed through Edgar that his mother was from the Umbrio family. He also asked Natasha, and she said yes. She didn't give much more detail. Her inheritance was canceled since her mother was exiled or something. Anyway, he didn't want the money from those scoundrels. With the money he would get from Carrie, he had plenty left over. He had plenty more books to bring into this world. Did you know I'm related to the Umbrio family? Asked Luke, walking beside Enid in the direction of the cafeteria. He had finished the first class of the day, and they were heading to lunch. Yeah, a lot of people already know about it. You're very famous, and everyone wants to know about your past, replied Enid. She had predicted that Luke would find this out at his meeting with Veronica, who belonged to the Umbrio family. "Why didn't you tell me?" asked Luke, feeling like an idiot. He was the only one who didn't know about his family history on the maternal side. "Well, I noticed you never cared about that stuff. You even seem to be bothered by fame, and your knowing about it might make you more bothered," replied Enid. "You seem to know me well," Luke said, taking Enid's hand and moving closer to her. Enid was right. Knowing would be a nuisance, and it didn't do her any good. Of course I know you," Enid said, laughing, moving closer to Luke as they walked into the cafeteria. As they entered the cafeteria, the murmur died down, and Luke felt more stares than usual on him. He knew it was a strange occurrence for him to be holding hands with Enid, but already the whole school knew about their relationship, and many times he appeared in public with her holding hands. "What happened?" asked Enid in a low tone. She was used to the stares for being with Luke, and she was getting used to it, but today was different. "I don't know," replied Luke. He noticed at one of the tables Xavier, who waved him over. Along with Enid, they made their way to Xavier's table, who was sitting with Bianca, Ajax, Sabrina, Yoko, Divina, and one more mermaid boy. It was weird to see everyone sitting at the same table. Now that Luke and Enid were there, it was arguably the most popular table in the 9th grade. "Hey, everyone," greeted Enid enthusiastically to her friends and the others. "What's up?" "I'm feeling more stares than usual," she added in a low tone. "This happened." "Play the video," replied Xavier, passing his cell phone to Enid. Let's see," said Enid, giving play to the video. It was weird that she didn't know the latest gossip of the moment. Luke walked over to see what this was all about. His brow furrowed as he watched the video. It was about the beating he gave the 2 older students. Who recorded this? Thought Luke. The video was shot from a distance, but with the zoom of a good cell phone, the fight looked perfect. The video ended with Luke kicking Brad several times. Viewed in third person, it looked pretty violent, but he had done it because the werewolf stamina was so good. He wasn't a madman. "Luke, I told you to be nice to the older students, right?" asked Enid, staring at Luke. "Huh? Did you say something like that?" said Luke without making eye contact with Enid. "Don't you listen to me when I talk?" asked Enid. "Now that you mention it, I do remember. It was self-defense." "That video is taken out of context," said Luke, justifying himself. Before Enid could reprimand him, further a bell rang through the speakers. Then a monotone voice was heard throughout the cafeteria. "Please have student Luke Poe proceed to Principal Weems's office," said the voice. "Say by the bell," thought Luke. He would rather be punished by the principal than reprimanded by Enid. Enid was the only person with whom he had stopped being rude and foul-mouthed. So, he could no longer win an argument when he had been partly to blame. "The power of love," says his stupid ghost great-great-grandfather. "I've got to go. See you in a bit if I don't get kicked out," Luke said, kissing Enid and hurrying out of the cafeteria. A smile broke out on Enid's face as she watched Luke's back get further and further away. "I never thought I'd see Luke so obedient." "You have my respect, Enid," Ajax said with a strange smile. Everyone else nodded in agreement. He didn't look like the same kid who kicked the crap out of an older student. "Hee. Luke is good. You just have to know him," said Enid, sitting up a little embarrassed. "Good? Did you see the same video I did? He beat the crap out of that older student. That's dangerous. What if that aggression comes back at you?" asked Yoko. She didn't like her friend's boyfriend. "Don't talk nonsense, Yoko," Enid said with a frown and a different tone than usual. The first ones who surrounded him in a threatening way were them. "It's taken out of context. Besides, Luke would never hurt me," Enid added. She won't allow her friend and roommate to criticize her boyfriend. It's true. It was 2 versus 1. 2 older students bullying a younger student. "Serves him right," Xavier said, defending his friend. He already considered Luke his friend. Yoko snorted slightly and didn't say anything else all lunch. Enid didn't speak to her either. Luke visited Principal Weem's office for the second time. Since he had his first talk months ago, he has not visited the office again. The difference was that this time Larissa had an angry look on her face as she looked at him, and there was a group of students from the 10th grade. Veronica and the other students, including Brad and the other boy, were beaten up by Luke. It was all because of the video that was circulating where Luke was brutally beating Brad and the other boy. As Luke expected, the culprit in this video was not Veronica. His cousin, as weird as it sounds to call her that, said she and the others were harassing him, and Luke just defended himself. She seemed very nervous. She knew that if Luke misinterpreted this, it could get her video with Tommy leaked, ending her social life and becoming a disgrace to her family. Veronica's friends, especially Luke's victims, couldn't believe that she was defending the guy who beat them up and stole their society's books. Ma'am, I understand. I can't let older students bully new students. They will be punished. 2 weeks, said Larissa, as she explained to them the punishment they would have to serve. It seemed strange to her that someone who was going to bully a person would openly say so to be punished, but that made things easier. Also, in the video, you could see that Luke was surrounded by several older students, and the latter were the ones who approached. Although you acted in self-defense, you were very violent, Luke. For 3 days, you will help the janitor, added Larissa, and Luke nodded with a slight grimace. You're dismissed. Luke, stay for a few minutes, said Larissa. Veronica and her friends left the office. Why are you so suddenly helping that arrogant boy? Asked the redhead. Ever since Luke mentioned that he sensed something funny, your attitude changed. What happened? Asked Daphne, looking at Veronica with narrowed eyes. Nothing. I'm just doing it because he's my cousin, Veronica said without further explanation and walked away from her friends. She took out her cell phone and texted Luke, explaining that she wasn't the one to blame for him being punished. He won't post a video, will he? Thought Veronica nervously. Why so much violence? Asked Larissa, looking at Luke. They backed me into a corner, and I got nervous. I couldn't control my strength. They were 2 guys who outweighed me in height and weight, said Luke, acting as best he could. Yes, of course, said Larissa, not believing a word of it. She knew Luke defeated a hag since she asked Natasha, and she confirmed it. He could defeat 2 werewolves who don't have their transformation without much difficulty. Let's put that aside. It's been several months since school started. What do you think of Nevermore? Asked Larissa with real enthusiasm. It's nice. Better than I first thought, Luke replied, being honest. At first, he wasn't looking forward to attending Nevermore. The first few days and weeks of class, he didn't like it much, but that changed when he met Enid and then became friend with Xavier. In the short time he knew Xavier, he considered him more trustworthy than Tom, his friend from the orphanage whom he had known for years. Although not because of this, he has enormous trust towards Xavier. On the other hand, the school facilities were very good. Delicious food, dormitories, places to train, nothing was lacking. Even a secret club library with very useful books. It was much better than living in an orphanage that was falling apart and full of annoying kids. I'm glad to hear that, Larissa said with a smile. But I've heard some rumors that you don't get along with everyone, added Larissa, not knowing how to say what was on her mind without sounding offensive. I have a girlfriend and a friend. What more do I need? Asked Luke. More than that would be a waste of time. That's good. I was really surprised when I heard you had a girlfriend, Larissa said, and Luke raised an eyebrow. Ahem. It would be nice if you socialized a bit more. I was wondering if you'd like to join a club, she asked. Socialize more? Thought Luke. Since he liked Larissa, he wouldn't be rude to her. Besides, that thanks to her he was able to make a contract with a publishing house without a problem, and it seemed that her concern was real. I was actually thinking of joining the archery club, Luke replied. He wasn't doing it to socialize, he was doing it to learn how to handle the bow and combine it with his powers. Hawkeye, here I come, Luke thought, although it would be hard to get to that level, but with his telekinetic powers, he might have more power than the Marvel superhero. That's great. Your partner is in that club. It will make inclusion easier. Leave the paperwork to me. You start the following Monday, said Larissa, who seemed more enthusiastic than him. After a few more words, Luke left the office. As he walked to his bedroom, he saw Veronica's message. She looked very desperate. I know. Only if you were an idiot would you be the one to blame, Luke thought, as he replied. He would not post Veronica's band video because of this event. Most likely the person who recorded it was a third party who had nothing to do with it and noticed the group of people. Since they were very popular students, he decided to record while hiding. In addition to Veronica's message, he received a message from the bearded man who interviewed him on the day of the festival. He told him that his interview would go up tomorrow, and he had already done the necessary research to publicly condemn the unethical acts of the normie school and the bullies. Good news, thought Luke with a faint smile. The days passed at Nevermore. December arrived, and it was getting closer and closer to Christmas and the start of the new year. During this time, Luke joined the archery club and managed to learn how to shoot a bow properly. Although his aim was good, using a bow is not the same as using his hands or his telekinetic powers. To his surprise, the captain of the club was the girl with the calm expression and cool gaze who belonged to the 10th graders. One of Veronica's friends. Her name was Daphne, and her archery skills were the best. To Luke's surprise, the captain was not reluctant to teach him. She put aside the earlier conflict they had and taught him the right way. Her professionalism was to be respected. Another important event was that his interview was posted on YouTube. It was the most viewed so far, surpassing 1 million views. A great number. What Luke found good about this was the stoning of the normie schools for expelling him and the bullies who picked on him. The bearded man presented a lot of evidence that made Luke's words about his past true. The school principals uploaded videos apologizing for all the attacks they were receiving for their one-sided behavior. The principal who wanted Luke to upload a video apologizing was removed from his position. Luke didn't care about this. He was ousted, and they never took his side. He didn't care that the old man would be out of a job. The best part was that Brad and his friends had to hide on social media and move out of Boston. People on the internet took it upon themselves to publish their personal details to the whole world. Luke didn't mind this either. He even enjoyed it. Revenge was good. He was never a person of high morals. If they had never done anything to him, he would not have acted this way. His training went on smoothly. The only difference was that he changed the focus on blue aura training. He stopped improving his telepathy and photographic memory. He focused on mind control and mind reading, then to a lesser extent on mind defense. Once he mastered control and reading, he will focus on mind defense with more emphasis. Why does he do this and not prioritize the safety of his mind? According to the book he read on mind reading, only advanced psychics can read your mind by looking at you from a distance. At a beginner level, the person literally has to be looking at you very closely and can only read the thoughts you are currently having. They cannot navigate your mind and know your secrets. Knowing this, which student will have such a high level of blue aura? It is very difficult or almost impossible for there to be a student with such abilities. It would be like being level 5 in telekinetic abilities or having an old man like Dumbledore in the school. So, he decided to devote more time to these skills. When he gets a good level, he will focus on mental defense. Christmas came. Luke bought 5 presents. 2 for Enid, 1 each for Xavier, Larissa, and Natasha. He would buy Edgar, but he is a ghost. The outings to buy the gifts were controlled by Natasha. She was more paranoid since the hag's attack. Enid wanted to have a romantic Christmas dinner, but Luke couldn't leave Nevermore because of the crazy killers after him. The real culprit was Natasha, though. Luke would agree to take the risk. It might make his Christmas a little more exciting, but Natasha wouldn't let him leave Nevermore without her watchful eye. It would be awkward to have dinner with Enid and have Natasha next to him, so he had to make do with the banquet held by the school. Nevermore was bathed in snow, and like Halloween, the students had taken it upon themselves to decorate the school in a Christmas fashion. They were not the typical Christmas decorations. They were a combination of Christmassy and scary, more in the style of the Outcasts. With the banquet over at midnight, Luke handed the gifts to Enid and Xavier. To Enid, he gave a beautifully intricate gold bracelet and a 7-book saga telling the story of a young wizard. Yes, it was Harry Potter. It seemed that the author of Harry Potter was able to survive in this world and publish her work. Not like Stephen King. So Luke could not plagiarize his works. Despite Harry Potter's fame, Enid had not read it. Xavier was given a very expensive wooden bow of excellent quality. He was very happy about the gift, as his first bow was normal and already had good use. Enid gave Luke a yin and yang necklace of kittens. The necklace was in pairs. One cat was black and hugged the white cat, forming the yin and yang symbol. Luke wore the black cat collar, and Enid wore the white cat collar. She also gave him a Christmas sweater. She had the same one. Both gifts match. Very typical Enid. Thus Christmas ended, becoming the most fruitful Christmas in Luke's life, although it wasn't too hard to top the previous ones. 3 months flew by. The new year had begun, and it was 2 months before classes and the school year ended. The months of January and February were hard for Luke. He hated having to wake up and have to get out of bed in freezing temperatures. Luckily, that was over, and spring had sprung. These months were very peaceful to Luke's liking. There was no attack from another crazy hag, though perhaps this was because he rarely left Nevermore. His assassins had no chance of attacking him, nor did he have another serious incident against older students. He had fun in his one-sided fight against Brad and the other idiot. He spent on classes, homework, his new club, training, and spending time with his girlfriend and his only friend Xavier. "This weekend, you get to meet my parents," said Enid excitedly with a big smile. That was the first thing Luke heard early one weekday morning before he entered the boring marginal history class. Classes were starting to get heavy, for it was only a short time before final exams. Luke was disheveled and with dark circles under his eyes. The night before, he had stayed up late playing video games with Xavier. How does she have so much enthusiasm in the morning? Luke thought, looking at Enid's wide smile. Already his brain was slow to activate in the morning, and his grumpiness reached the highest peaks in the day. "Yeah, fantastic," replied Luke with zero enthusiasm and a tired voice. He woke up grumpy. Again, thought Enid, taking a deep breath. "I'm sure you'll get along just fine. Especially with my dad," said Enid, sitting down on one bench and opening the other for Luke. Luke sat down, seeing that he had no choice but to sit with his cute, chatty girlfriend. Luckily, the old teacher, who had many wrinkles, was very stern and did not allow the students to talk in his class while he was giving his boring lesson. The class ended, and it was time for lunch. I created a basic guide, so you know a few things beforehand. Before I met my parents, mostly for my mother. She can get very judgmental with strangers, said Enid, holding up a pink notebook with cute stickers. "Let's do it while we eat," she added with her usual smile. "I can't. Xavier asked me for a private chat between friends. You know, his problems with Bianca," whispered Luke. "I understand," said Enid. "We'll do that later." "See you," said Luke, catching Xavier before he left. His lie could not be uncovered. This was clearly a lie he came up with on the spot. He didn't want to spend his lunchtime talking about Enid's parents and what he must do to get them to like him. "So, you brought me here because you don't want to have lunch with your girlfriend," Xavier said, resting his lunch on the ground. They were on the rooftop. "You make it sound bad. I need to recharge my battery so I can resist Enid's enthusiasm in the mornings," Luke said, starting to eat. "It's already noon," said Xavier. He too had dark circles under his eyes. "How long have you two been together?" asked Xavier. 5 months, almost 6, replied Luke. "Why?" "It was rare that you two didn't have any fights or problems. Sooner or later something would come up," replied Xavier. Luke nodded. Xavier was right. So far they hadn't had any fights. It was very odd considering how different their personalities were, especially Enid's great enthusiasm for everything compared to how moody and impatient Luke was. "How do you and Bianca work it out?" asked Luke. He knew Xavier was an expert at fights, as he had one every few days. He didn't know how he was still with that girl. If his canon calculations were correct, they should last a year and several months longer. How would they put up with each other that long, when they fight so often? "We yelled at each other for several minutes. Then we ignore each other until one of us decides to apologize or try to make up. It's usually me," replied Xavier. Nodded Luke. He didn't look capable of yelling. Even though he was someone moody, his anger was hard to provoke, especially to the point of screaming his head off. His grumpiness caused him to be rude to other people, and they ended up getting mad at him, not the other way around. The weekend is here. On Sunday was celebrated Parents' Day, a day that takes place once a year. Families attend picnics and luncheons organized by the school. Luke's parents were dead, so he would not receive a visit from his parents, but students were able to spend time with another student's family. He wasn't the only one without visitors. Xavier and Bianca didn't receive visits from their parents either, although their parents were alive. After a speech from the principal, the day's picnic with the families began. Luke watched the happy families. Xavier was with Ajax's family, and Bianca was with the family of one of her siren friends. He looked for Veronica, since her father would be his uncle and her mother's brother. He found her sitting alone on a bench, looking at her cell phone. Her millionaire, psychic father must hardly pay any attention to her, Luke thought, shaking his head. So far, he didn't upload the video of Veronica and Tommy, because his cousin had gotten him all the books he needed from the Nightshade Society library. His eyes moved again until they stopped on a very familiar blonde hair. It was Enid talking to her parents, specifically with her mother. Not far behind them were 4 boys, playing roughly. They were her older brothers. Should I run away? Thought Luke seriously. He knew he wouldn't be able to get along with Enid's mother. From what he knows from Enid, she is very strict and judgmental. Luke wouldn't get along with this kind of person, as he is not someone patient, kind, or a stocking licker. His gaze met Enid's, and she raised her hand, calling him to come closer. Her parents also pinned their gaze on him. Ugh, it's late already. I must have patience, Luke thought, walking towards his destiny. Luke, these are my parents, Esther and Murray. Mom, Dad, this is my boyfriend, Luke, said Enid, introducing her parents. Nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, Luke said, trying to put on his best smile that looked very forced and unnatural. Murray nodded to Luke without saying a word, but his expression was friendly. He was a man of few words, very different from his wife and children. Luke already liked him. Mrs.? I'm not that old yet, said Esther. Luke felt otherwise, but decided not to say anything. Mom, whispered Enid with a frown. Luke Poe, right? Asked Esther, looking up and down at Luke, who nodded slightly. A psychic, huh? Your parents didn't come? Asked Esther. Enid's expression turned nervous. Everyone at school knew Luke was from an orphanage. Her mother should be aware it was common knowledge. They're 6 feet underground, Luke replied, surprising everyone with the answer. The atmosphere fell into an awkward silence as Luke and Esther looked at each other. Have respect for your parents, brat, exclaimed Edgar in an amused tone. On his face was a faint smile. The response was amused and with a hint of dark humor. It was witty, wasn't it? Said Luke mentally with a slight smile, looking at his great-great-grandfather, who shared the same type of humor. Esther and Murray looked at Luke's smile with slightly frightened expressions. What kid says his parents are buried 6 feet underground and has a smile on his face? This is going bad, thought Enid. She knew Luke's dark humor and had told him to keep it to himself at the first meeting with her parents. Luckily, at that moment, one of her rambunctious brothers showed up. I'm hungry. Let's eat, shouted one of Enid's brothers approaching their parents. Before long, Luke found himself at a table, sitting with Enid's entire family. Plates filled with undercooked red meat. What a great feast, Edgar said sarcastically. Eat up, boys. You must fill your stomachs well, said Esther, starting to cut the meat with her cutlery. Luke looked at his plate with no appetite. This meat was undercooked. What's wrong? Why aren't you eating? Asked Esther, looking at Luke, who was just staring at the plate. I like my meat with more cooking, replied Luke bluntly. No, that's not good. The meat is at the perfect point. Psychics don't appreciate good food, Esther said, shaking her head. Well, your stomachs are tougher. Normally, you can eat more raw meat, said Luke, bringing his ear close to the meat. What are you doing? Asked Esther with a frown. Don't you hear it? Asked Luke in a serious tone. What? Asked one of Enid's brothers. Moo, moo, said Luke, imitating the sound of cow. Enid's brothers, catching on to the joke, began to burst out laughing. Even on Murray's face, a smile formed, and he held in his laughter. That's a good one. Maybe if you poke the meat with a fork, legs will sprout, and it will start running, said Edgar, amused. That bastard is funny, said one of Enid's brothers, brutally patting Luke's back. Luke got along well with Enid's brothers. This wasn't always the case. At first, he felt the menacing stares from all 4 of them. Since he became boyfriends with his little sister, they were very protective of Enid. But since he swept the floor with Brad and the other werewolf, they started treating him very well. They seemed to have a rivalry with Brad's group of werewolves. The only person who wasn't the least bit amused by the joke was Esther, who was frowning more than usual. Enid looked worriedly at her mother. The picnic continued, and Luke's jokes disrespecting werewolf traditions continued. He made them because he noticed that Enid's brothers and her father were not bothered by them. They even seemed to be amused and kept the jokes going. If he had seen that the jokes were not well received, he would have stopped, but that was not the case. "Where are you going?" asked Enid, looking at her mother, who suddenly stood up from her chair. Since Luke had started with the bad jokes, she hadn't said a word. What bothered her the most was that her whole family seemed to be having fun with this stranger. "I'll go talk to some old friends," Esther replied, leaving the table. Her husband got up as well. He said goodbye to Luke with a friendly smile and followed his wife. "We'll go talk to some girls. You two have fun. See you later, Luke, sis," said the four siblings, saying their goodbyes and quickly disappearing. Suddenly at the table, it was just Enid and Luke, sitting across from each other. "Why?" asked Enid without her usual smile. "What do you mean?" asked Luke, chewing the tough red meat. He was taking longer than the others to chew this tough meat. "Why did you make fun of all the werewolf traditions in front of my mother?" "I told you she is very strict and cares a lot about those things," Enid said. "Your father and brothers were having fun." Luke justified himself. "I gave you the tips to make a good impression, and you didn't even try," said Enid, angry for the first time at Luke. "Why should I act to get her to like me?" "She seemed to hate me," huffed Luke in an annoyed tone. "Because she's my mom. You were just supposed to make an effort, because it was the first time you met her. At another meeting, you could make your stupid jokes," exclaimed Enid, slamming her fist on the table. "Why should I make the effort, and she doesn't? Besides, you seem to be looking for her approval all the time," said Luke, who had no plans to back down. "Why do you want her approval so badly?" he asked. "You wouldn't understand," said Enid angrily. "I wouldn't understand? I guess you're right, since my mother is buried 6 feet underground," said Luke, getting up from his seat. This time his tone was cold, different from when he made the joke. "I didn't mean that," Enid said in a nervous tone, getting up. She had let her anger get the better of her. She wanted her mother to accept Luke at their first meeting or make a good impression, and it had all gone wrong. "Yes, you meant that. Go spend the picnic with your happy family," snorted Luke, turning away and leaving Enid alone. "Are you okay?" asked Edgar, who witnessed the whole discussion. He noticed that Luke looked hurt about his family. It was the first time he had seen him that way. "Yeah, just stupid school dramas," replied Luke dryly. Rather than waste time on a stupid picnic, he would train. Luke arrived at the gigantic gym. Of course, it was empty and dark. He turned on the lights and began going to the weights area. There were 3 areas in the gym. The weights area, the fencing area. This area is secondary and smaller compared to where they have fencing classes. Finally, an area with a couple of rings. This is used for friendly duels or for the wrestling clubs that are at Nevermore. Luke walked over to the weights area. It was the best place to train his telekinesis and achieve new weights. He was like a muscle. You had to get it progressive overload. As he was thinking about how to train to get rid of his anger from the argument he had with Enid, he heard the door open. He thought it was Enid, but when he turned around, he saw another blonde girl. A girl with a delicate figure, green eyes, and wavy blonde hair. Sabrina Jones, one of the most popular girls in her year, and a psychic who can create and control fire. "What are you doing here?" asked Luke in an unfriendly tone. He wasn't in the mood and wanted to train alone. His relationship with Sabrina was almost nil, although he had more interaction with her than with other students. Months ago, she helped him with his training, and later they went to the Harvest Festival. "Is the gym just for you?" "I come to train," Sabrina replied in a calm tone and walked towards Luke. "Aren't you with your family?" asked Luke, annoyed. "No, my parents died when I was little," replied Sabrina with a slight smile infused with sadness. Luke was surprised and felt a strange feeling. Empathy. He was feeling empathy for someone else? "How did they die?" asked Luke. "An accident," replied Sabrina with a sad expression, and Luke felt more empathy. "My parents died too," said Luke, feeling weird about the answer he was giving. Minutes ago, he was angry and upset, but now he was giving pity next to a girl with no parents just like him. "I heard you came from an orphanage." "It's a shame," said Sabrina with a sad expression, taking a few slow steps towards Luke. "This girl understands me," thought Luke, feeling comfortable with Sabrina's presence. "Too bad you didn't die with them," added Sabrina, attacking Luke with her hand. The fingers of Sabrina's hand were clasped together, the palms slightly curved inward, as if she were pointing a sharp blade. Most dangerous of all, her palm was engulfed in a fiery flame that enveloped her fingers. Luke reacted instinctively to the deadly attack that was headed straight for his head. Sabrina's fiery fingers scraped his cheek, making a large gash. TSCH. Sabrina clicked her tongue and with her other hand created flames and attacked Luke. Her goal was to incinerate him completely. However, Luke didn't stand still and watch her attack him. In fact, he did. He physically stood still. Staring at Sabrina with his telekinesis, he sent her away from him. Sabrina was pushed more than 10 meters, and her second attack was nullified before it reached its destination. To Luke's surprise, the blonde girl didn't go flying like a rag until she crashed into the wall. A translucent barrier protected her, so she was only pushed a few meters without taking any damage. What just happened? Thought Luke, touching the blood coming out of his cheek. Besides feeling pain from the cut, he felt a great burning. Luke was able to dodge Sabrina's attack for a few seconds, all thanks to his clairvoyance ability that he called observation hockey. He did not sense any murderous intent from the blonde until the last moment when she attacked. If he hadn't trained all these months this skill, it would have been very likely that he would have been killed by Sabrina's sudden attack. TSCH. How the hell did you dodge that? Asked Sabrina in a whining tone and a frown. Her once empathetic expression was now filled with anger and rage. Her eyes gave off murderous intent. Clairvoyance saved your life, Edgar said in a serious tone. He was just as surprised as Luke. He didn't sense anything strange with the girl and only thought she wanted to flirt with his great-great-grandson. If he had had the same power as when he was alive, he could have easily noticed and warned him, but now he was a ghost with almost no powers. What are you doing, bitch? That's attempted murder, Luke said with a frown, wiping the blood dripping from his cheek. Yes, I know. Next time, I won't miss and cut your head off, Sabrina said with an angelic smile very different from what she was saying. What's with her changing emotions? Luke thought. You were the one responsible for sending that hag, asked Luke. Oh, you seem to be using your brain a little, Luke Poe. Yes, it was me. I didn't think you could beat that hag. It wasn't an easy process controlling that madwoman, replied Sabrina with a smile. Dual aura user, Edgar said with an interested look. In addition to possessing an orange aura, you have a red aura. You can manipulate people's emotions, Luke said with a grimace. That's why he felt empathy towards this girl. Because of that power, he would never empathize with a person he barely knows, no matter how many things they have in common. It's kind of obvious, you idiot. It's not too hard to figure out. Now die, I don't have time, Sabrina said, creating 2 fireballs in her palms. They were much bigger than what she showed in class. Sabrina launched the 2 fireballs, and they shot toward Luke at great speed. He felt the temperature rise rapidly. Luke raised both hands, and the 2 fireballs stopped midway. He tried to throw them back, but there was something in the way. Sabrina was also struggling to get them to head towards him. Arrogant. Trying to get my fire to attack me, exclaimed Sabrina indignantly. I wonder if you're resistant to your fire. Bitch, exclaimed Luke, increasing his telekinetic strength. The fireballs began to head towards Sabrina at a great speed. He could move 350 kilograms with his telekinetic strength. He knew he wouldn't lose in a push against another person. Besides, Sabrina was not a yellow aura user. She controlled the fire and pushed it. Luke controlled more numerous and powerful telekinetic waves. Controlling objects and pushing them at high speeds was his specialty. If someone created 2 fireballs for him, he was saving him the trouble of finding a weapon to use. Shit, thought Sabrina, concentrating all her energy on making the fire disappear. She partially succeeded. Small flames scorched her clothes, leaving slight burns on the fabric and causing the smell of smoke in the air. She didn't think Luke's telekinetic strength would be that strong, level 3 or 4, thought Sabrina with a frown. The fireballs were too big to make them disappear in such a short amount of time. Luke didn't give Sabrina time to rest. 10 25 kilograms discs floated up behind him and headed for the blonde girl at full speed. Luke at this time had already managed to lift objects not in his range of vision. If he was in a cloud of smoke like when he faced the witch, he could still use his telekinesis. This is thanks to the sixth sense he developed. Another clairvoyant ability he learned during this time with Edgar's guidance. This sixth sense gives the user a type of extrasensory perception, allowing him to see people or objects if they are hidden from view. Previously, he could not do this. To control objects through his telekinesis, they had to be in his range of vision, but now he no longer had this disadvantage. He had a 360-degree vision. Although to have this vision, he had to activate the ability. It was not passive. It would be passive at an advanced level. From all directions, the discs flew at Sabrina at a speed equal to a bullet. No matter how much she defended herself with a fire barrier, it would be useless. Since the discs are made of iron, they will pass the fire and only get hotter. Sabrina's fire does not have the intensity to melt the discs in a matter of seconds, or so Luke thought. Sabrina, sensing imminent danger, did not hold back. Fire shot out of her eyes at an incredible speed and power, as if they were laser beams, but fire. To Luke's surprise, 5 discs were pulverized. The heat of the fire shot from her eyes was far superior to that of the fireballs. However, Luke maneuvered the remaining 5 discs to attack Sabrina's blind spots. She had no eyes on her back to shoot fire. Just when Luke thought the discs would crush Sabrina's delicate body, the barrier that protected her before appeared again. The barrier turned the remaining discs to ash. "Does she have another aura?" muttered Luke in confusion. "No. 3 aura users are rare. You won't find 2 in one place. That barrier is a defensive artifact. Look at her right hand. It must be that strange ring," said Edgar, and Luke noticed a ruby ring on Sabrina's right hand. "The Spellman family has good objects," Luke said with a look full of hatred. "This girl belonged to the family that killed her parents and left his family in ruins." "Of course. My family isn't on the brink like the Poe family," Sabrina said with a wide smile. "This bitch," thought Luke, feeling anger boil through his veins. "Don't be swayed. She's controlling your emotions to make you angry," said Edgar. Sabrina went back on the attack using her full strength. Her eyes glowed again, and she was about to fire her fire beam again. She couldn't let Luke attack her again with so many discs. However, as she was about to fire, she felt an unfamiliar voice in her head telling her to stop. Her eyes returned to normal, and she saw that near Luke 30 discs were flying around him. Each weighs 10 kilograms. "Let's see how long your ring lasts," said Luke, and the 30 discs began to fly at an incredible speed. "What happened?" thought Sabrina in alarm, seeing how 30 discs surrounded her and started to fly towards her. Again, she wanted to launch her powerful fire laser beam ability, but again she heard a voice commanding her to stop, and she did. The discs began to be destroyed by the barrier. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 10, but the bombardment would not stop. Every time Sabrina wanted to destroy discs with her fire, a voice in her head told her to stop, and she obeyed. "That's him. That's mind control. He has 2 auras," thought Sabrina in surprise, looking at Luke. As disc number 20 was destroyed by the barrier, the ruby in Sabrina's hand was destroyed. "No, this is not good," thought Sabrina in terror, looking at 10 discs surrounding her. She no longer had a barrier to protect her, and besides, she couldn't use her fire as Luke stopped her actions with mind control when she was about to summon fire. "Come on, Spellman. Show me that earlier arrogance," Luke said with a stern and hateful expression. His anger had been heightened by this girl, and he was already in a bad mood from before. Maybe it would be a good idea to crush all her bones with the iron discs.